All right, but that's definitely enough time on that question. And you know what? Let's just leave it at that. That's the quant section. I was going to do a question about overlapping sets because I wanted to revisit doing 3 overlapping sets because some of us, like anyone who took GMAT Ninja's class, may have learned a really cool new technique about 3 overlapping sets. So I wanted to do another question for that, but no, we've taken far too much time already. So this became a class, literally became a class on mixtures. So there you go. You like sets, Sweb. All right. I promise you, Sweb, the next GMAT study session, we will do overlapping sets. But for now, let's do some RC. So, Harsh, do you want to join in the voice channel? So you should be able to see there's the voice channel in Discord. Oh, you've joined me in there before, so you know how to join me there. But if you can join me in the Discord, would be good. So yeah, what we're about to do is pretty experimental, as far as I'm concerned. Like, I did this with Ohm, but we did it just privately. Like, we just did it on a direct call between us. And I was like really, really happy with how it went. And I think Ohm is as well. Shame he's not here because he could provide his input on how he felt about it. But I did this with Ohm and I was really happy with how it went. So I have been curious to try it again. And so that's why I wanted to do it in this session. But let's get you on voice. So you are unmuted, Harsha, so you should be able to hear me. And what I'm going to do as well is unmute in this channel. So now my voice should also be coming through Discord. So Harsha, you might want to mute the Twitch stream because you'll hear my voice twice. But you want to hear my voice on the Discord chat, so that way you and I are talking at the same time. And then when you talk, other people will still hear us at the same time, if that makes sense. So, are you able to talk, Harsha? Do you have your mic?
Hey, hi. Yeah.
Awesome. Can chat let me know if you heard Harsha fine, if the volume needs to change between him and me, or need to make him louder or me quieter? Awesome.
No, I think it's fine.
Awesome. All right. Oh, my neck is getting sore. I'm gonna have to do some yoga after this. Okay. So what I did with was we basically did 2 passages, and when I say we, he did 2 passages. The first one, he just did it kind of completely on his own, but saying out loud every single thing he was doing or thinking. And so I'm going to start finding a passage while I'm speaking. So what I mean by that is, if he's reading the passage, he's reading it out loud, like using his voice. If he's thinking like, oh, when I read this, I think maybe the logical thing is this, this, and this. Then he was like saying everything he was thinking, he was saying it out loud. Reason being, so I could hear it. So basically what I would ask you, Harsha, is when you're doing this, to do the same thing. So just every single thing that comes to your mind is say it out loud so that I hear that what it is. And if you're reading, again, reading it out loud. So what I don't want is, like, I'm just going to open up a passage quickly, and let's just pick an easy one. Well, what they say is easy. Who knows what easy passage means? And I only want OG ones. Awesome. Okay. Ooh, last post from GMAT Ninja. So depending on if we need something, we've got Ninja's advice potentially to lean on. All right. You guys can see that? Oh, awesome. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to share the link to this passage as well. I highly recommend anyone who is watching this open this passage yourself, because if you want to scroll up and down on your own, it would be helpful to be able to do that on your own rather than relying on me having to be on the right part of the screen.
Can you, excuse me?
Yes.
Can you share that over this muted text chat also?
Yeah, for sure, definitely.
Because I'm not seeing the Twitch right now.
Oh, okay, no problem, no problem. Thank you for asking. So yeah, I've just put the question into the muted channel as well.
Okay.
Hopefully, I'm going to slightly zoom out so that we can maybe see the question on the same screen. Oh, beautiful. I like it. I like the look of it. All right. So yeah, so that's basically what we'll do. So don't worry about the time. I'm not even, actually, I'm going to get rid of the clock as well. So don't worry about the time.
Okay.
Just kind of do the process. And yeah, let me ask you though, what would be your preference? Because we could kind of do this a couple of ways. So that's what I did the first time with him, right? He just completely solved it. I stayed silent and I took some notes to myself to remind myself of things that I wanted to talk about. But he just did, like, went through the whole passage himself, answered questions himself, and I was just sort of staying silent. And then the second time, for a completely different passage, for the second passage, what we did was, instead of staying silent, if I had some thoughts, I would sort of, hopefully not too abruptly, like disruptively, but I would sort of interrupt and say, like, if I had a thought, like, wait, what about this? Or did you think about that? And like, just prompt what I was thinking at the same time. And the reason for that was the difference being between just hearing, oh, I could have done that back then. Like, oh, that's all. Not even I could have. Like, Harry would have done that back then. The difference is now you're in that moment. Like, you literally read a sentence, and now Harry's saying that's what he's thinking. Well, if it's a good thing for you to be thinking, then what did I miss right now? Like, what was it that I just read that Harry saw differently? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I got it.
So like, that's the idea behind that second one. The idea was it's in that moment, you still have the same exact information in your brain. You're not looking back trying to put it together. So that's what we did. But another difference there is that Ohm had already heard a bit about the way that I do it. So he was already testing the way I do it, like my method, quote unquote, that I've just learned from other places and stuff and put together. But so I'm going to ask you, would you prefer for me to just run through that quickly so you can have that in your mind on this first run? Or would you rather just completely do it however you're doing it right now? And then I can talk about that. Like, which one would you prefer?
No, I have seen your method of solving these RCs in the earlier video that you have uploaded to the YouTube. So,
oh, awesome. Okay. All right. So you might be in a similar.
But the thing is, I have tried it over few passages. I mean, for the longer passages, for me at least, it kind of worked like 60%. I mean, I got like around 50 to 60% accuracy. But for shorter passages, maybe the passages were dense. Or I mean, I have asked you the same question. Would you do the same kind of method even for shorter passages also? While you were doing this for longer passages, you said like you would do the same kind of thing. The first 3 to 4 lines you would be reading with full concentration, noting down, and how the markers help, and how getting the tone and the main idea of other is right.
Right. Yeah, I think yeah, long versus short is an interesting question. So long passages, for one, like, I get disappointed with a long passage because it means it's going to take longer. But yeah, again, that's like a little bit of impatience, ADHD brain maybe. I can't blame ADHD for everything. Maybe I'm just impatient. Um, but yeah, so long versus short passage, and actually a separate question, dense versus um, maybe not as dense, like maybe a little easier to understand passage.
Yeah.
So with a short passage, you might read a little bit more, I think, just because you may as well, sort of thing. And what I mean by that is, you've heard me talk about it before, like um, starting in the first paragraph, the main, like, basically what I want to know is I want to know very clearly what I think the main idea of the whole passage is. And if there's a conclusion there, then I want to know what the conclusion is as well. So for me, I'm reading until I have those two answers, and if I don't get those two answers, then I'm probably reading the whole first paragraph. So, and when I say if I don't get those two answers, sometimes there's no conclusion, right? Like sometimes there's no conclusion. Maybe not in the first paragraph. Maybe there's a conclusion in the first line of the second paragraph. You know, in rare occasions, you might get the conclusion at the end of the entire passage, like rarely, but maybe there's no conclusion in the first paragraph. And so I'm reading to find the conclusion until I find it and I understand the main idea. Or if I can't find it, then I probably end up reading the whole paragraph. And so my point there is, if a passage is a short passage, then maybe the first paragraph is only 3 sentences. Now, I read the first 2 sentences, and I already know. Okay, now I know the main idea, and I know the conclusion. Well, there's only one more sentence left, and it's short. I might as well read it. Like, so that's why I think maybe sometimes I read, like, not in volume, like the actual amount I read is probably less, or it has to be less probably. But I might read the whole first paragraph more often in a short passage, because there's like, if there's only one line left, sometimes I might just read it anyway, so that I have it. But with the rest of the passage, that's less common. Dense versus less dense, I mean, I don't think that changes anything for me. The more dense it is, it just makes it harder to get your head around certain concepts, I suppose. But how much I read doesn't really change, I don't think. What it will do is, for specific questions, it will mean I have to, like, take more time to answer a specific question, because if the content is really confusing, like technical science stuff or something, then if they give me a specific question saying how many enzymes of this thing, blah blah blah, then I want to be really sure that I'm understanding the thing I'm reading when I'm answering that. So that might take longer. But again, I don't think I'm reading more of the text. I still think it's just how long it takes me to read it is longer. So yeah. Hey, Fallen. Thanks for the compliment. Yeah, it's going well. But there's a third type. There's like a third difference, I think, maybe. So long, short, dense versus, let's say, simpler. And then the other one is if it's not in paragraphs, like if it's all one paragraph. In that situation, I don't have the first line of each paragraph to like prompt me. So in that situation, you kind of have to break it up yourself, because now this big block of text, which is one paragraph, now what they're trying to do is basically put it all into, they're going to have like the structure of the story that paragraphs would normally have, but they're putting it into one big block of text. So you kind of have to break it up yourself. And a big thing you'll be doing there is like scanning for keywords to sort of say, you know, where are they making shifts in what they're talking about. So that might be another difference as well, if it's a one paragraph versus multiple paragraphs. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, if you've already seen that other video, keeping in mind that things, like everything that I'm doing is an evolving process. So we might do something today where I go, actually, I might have to rethink how I do this. So it might change even today. But yeah, if you've already seen that, then it might kind of play out similar. So yeah, why don't you? Why don't you just get started? So yeah, we're not going to use it. We're not going to worry about a clock, but
Okay.
tackle this question as if, or starting with the passage, I suppose. If you normally look at the passage first before you look at the question, whatever. If you normally look at the question first, that's fine too. Just kind of do whatever you want to do,
Okay.
but just say everything
Yeah.
out loud as much as you possibly can.
Sure, sure. And I just want to give a disclaimer
Yeah,
that I'm a non-native, so maybe I might interpret some of the meanings of the words differently. So
no worries.
after the passage, kindly correct me, okay?
No problem at all. No worries at all. I'm going to stay like largely, well, unless there's some emergency, I'm going to stay completely silent during this. So, but otherwise, yeah.
Okay.
All right. Good luck.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. First, the question states which of the following best states the difference between free trade and fair trade as explained in the passage. So I need to look about free trade and fair trade. Okay, fine. So Arborea is floundering in the global market. Okay, it's hovering around, incurring devastating losses in market position and profits. Okay, market position and profits. The problem is not its products, but trade policy. Fine. Arborea faces the prospect of continuing economic losses until business and political leaders recognize the fundamental differences between. Okay, both are fundamental differences between two different economic. Okay, its own and foreign economic systems. Today, the key trade issue is not free trade. Okay, free trade. Key trade issue is not free trade versus perfectionism, but diminishing trade versus expanding trade. This is the question: free trade and trade trade as explained in the passage. Okay. Okay, it is operating with an obsolete. Okay, the trade policy is obsolete. Not okay. It was a past one when Arborea and Wolfland dominated the global economy. Tariffs were the principal obstacle to trade. Okay, and Arborean supremacy was uncontested in virtually all industries. In the intervening decades, economic circumstances have shifted radically. Okay, but its trade policies has not shifted. Today, Arborea trade policy seems paralyzed by the relentless conflict between proponents of free and trade. Okay, free and trade. The free traders argue that Arborea market should be open and the movement of goods and services across national borders unrestrained. Okay, it has to be free. The fair traders assert that access to Arborean market should be restricted until Arborean businesses are granted equal access to farm. Okay, this is some sort of market kind of thing where both foreign and equal access has to be there. They contend that free trade is impossible while other nations erect barriers to Arborean exports. Both are correct. Okay, free trade requires equal access and equal access leads to free trade. But both sides base their positions on the same two outdated premises. Okay, maybe I can go to the question. Key differences best states the difference between the free trade and fair trade as explained by free trade requires no trade tariffs whatsoever, whereas fair trade assumes multilateral agreement on tariffs for goods of equal worth. So we are talking about equal worth. Granted access to foreign markets, they contend that free trade. Okay. The fair trade asserts that access to Arborean market should be restricted until Arborean business are granted equal access to foreign markets. So we are talking about access and okay, this is talking about goods of equal worth, multilateral agreement. I don't think A is that. B, free trade is based on unrestricted movement of goods across national boundaries. Okay, whereas fair trade is based on nations' restriction of commerce with each nation that erects trade barriers to the first nation's exports. Okay, kind of confusing, but I can keep B aside. See, The trade policies of countries like Arboria are based on the principles of free trade, whereas the trade policies of other types of NOC can be rejected. Free trade nations negotiate individual trade agreements with each of the trading partners, whereas fair trade nations conduct multilateral trade negotiations. Free trade nations negotiate individual trade agreements with each other, with each of their trading partners. I'm not sure. So, free trade assumes a constant level of global commerce, whereas fair trade promotes a steady expansion of international trade. This is out of scope. So maybe I will read B again. Free trade is based on unrestricted movement of goods across all national boundaries. Okay, free trade. Free traders argue that our Arborian market should be open and movement of goods and services across national boundaries unrestrained. Okay, across national boundaries, unrestricted movement. Yeah. And whereas fair trade is based on nations' restriction of commerce with each of the nations that are trade barriers. Okay. The fair trade, yeah, I'll go with B, the first one. The next question, it can be inferred that the author of the passage would most likely agree with which are the following statements about multilateral trade negotiations. So where have I seen this multilateral trade negotiations? So it's not in the first paragraph. It's not in the second paragraph. Multilateral trade negotiations. Okay, the third paragraph. Okay, the multilateral negotiations are the most effective way to resolve pressing trade issues. It can be inferred the author of the passage would most likely agree with each of the following statements about matter. They are the most effective way to resolve trade problems. They are the most effective way to resolve pressing trade issues. And it's talking about resolve trade problems. Yes, A looks okay. They are most effective in dealing with fair trade issues between nations. But both sides base their positions on the same two outdated premises. Most effective way to resolve pressing trade issues between nations. Fair trade knows B is out. They have only begun to make an impact on world trade now. Arborian reliance on multilateral trade negotiations, while appropriate in the past, is inadequate for today's global. The principles of multilateral trade negotiations are incompatible with current Arborian foreign trade. No, I'll go with A. The second one is A. The third question, which of the following statements best summarizes the author's opinion of free traders and fair traders? So, authors, okay, the question is about author's assumption, author's opinion of free traders and fair traders. So maybe it's time to free traders. Okay. I'll just read the options. The free and fair traders continuing debate provides a healthy and effective forum for examining Arborian trade policy. Okay, I'll go back to the passage. Author's opinion, maybe in the fourth paragraph, in the last paragraph, both assumptions are wrong. Okay, before that, they contend that free trade is impossible while other nations erect barriers to Arborian exports. Both are correct. Fair trade requires equal access, and equal access leads to free trade. But both sides base their positions on the same two outdated premises. There are two premises. Both assumptions are wrong. The 40-year-old GATT now covers less than 7%. World trade is no longer dominated by In the free trade economies, nearly 75% is conducted by forging a multilateral trade policy consensus among so many diverse economic systems has become virtually impossible, and while multilateral talks drag on Arboria misses opportunities for trade expansion. Okay, I'm not getting this. Which of the following statements best summarizes the author's opinion of free traders and fair traders? The free and fair traders continuing debate provides a healthy and effective forum for examining Arborean. No, I don't think so. A. The proponents of fair trade are essentially correct, while those who advocate free trade are not. Mm, I'm not sure, but let me read the other three options. The proponents of free trade are better able to deal with current economic problems than are the fair traders. Neither the free nor the fair traders can come up with a workable trade policy because neither takes multilateral negotiations into account. The proponents of both free and fair trade have based their positions on out of date premises that do not reflect current economic conditions. Definitely not E. Neither the free nor fair trade can come up with a workable trade policy because neither takes multilateral negotiations. So, yeah, the author's opinion in the final paragraph said that both assumptions are wrong. So, mm, I think D is the answer for the third one. Then the author mentions all of the following as characteristic of world trade in the mid 1940s, except mid 1940s. Okay, Auburn and artifact of the mid 1940s.
Sorry, just pause you for a second.
Okay.
Do you want to answer all of these questions, or
No,
are you happy to kind of maybe stop after the 4?
Yeah, we can stop. We can stop.
Because we probably have enough to talk about a little bit.
Yeah.
And then maybe after we talk about it,
Okay.
maybe you can finish the last of these questions. But yeah, I think that's probably enough to talk about, because I didn't actually check how many questions there were, but there are 8, so that's a lot. So
Okay.
yeah, and that was question 4 you just did, right?
Yeah, I've done 3. The
We've done
fourth
3.
one I was about to, but it's okay.
Oh, okay,
It's
3.
fine.
I mean, still, I think that's good.
Oh.
So how are you feeling, just in general, before I say anything?
Uh,
As in,
I mean, I did not understand the passage properly, to be
mhm.
frank. I mean, maybe I put myself in the exam condition, so I thought the time is rushing.
Sure,
So
sure.
rather than reading the entire 4 paragraphs, maybe I should skip to the first question and see what's it asking, other than any key details kind of thing. If there is an inference question, then I need to like actually read and understand, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, here's what I'm actually going to do. I'm going to share my screen while I'm talking. So what people see on stream, you'll be able to see it in the Discord as well.
Okay.
If this lets me share screen. And yeah, I'll just share my actual screen. Okay, so let me know once you can see.
Yeah, I can see the screen.
Yeah, so I've got basically, yeah, so you can see I've got the question open. And
Yes.
so when I highlight stuff, and if I'm talking about something, I like to highlight and stuff while I'm talking.
Okay.
So yeah, first thing I'll say is the kind of same disclaimer you've probably heard me say before. What I'm going to talk through is just how I do it, because that's what I know. So it's not the right way or the only way or the best way. It's just one way to approach it. But the only reason that I feel confident enough to be able to talk about it is that I do feel quite confident with RC. And so the reason I share how I approach it with people is not so that, I want you to do it exactly how I do it. But maybe if there's something that I do that helps, you might end up doing something which is 90% the same as what you already do, but you pick up something that changes 10% of it, and it makes you a little bit more accurate, or whatever, that would be great. So what I do exactly is not going to be what you do, because we're not the same person. So it goes without saying. But yeah, and so I might have to read certain lines multiple times that you might not have to read multiple times. But then other things maybe you do have to read multiple times, because not being a native speaker or something, right? So
Yeah.
different things, all that sort of stuff. So anything I say, it's not me saying you must do this or that. It's literally just me saying this is what I would do if you want to think about that to see if it might be helpful. So
Okay.
anyway, so you started reading the question first, which I guess some people say is like, some people recommend that, like some courses and stuff will recommend that. Personally, I don't, because I want to get my idea of what the passage is about without being influenced by seeing anything else. So like, I don't want the question to give me an idea of what I now think the passage will be about before I've looked at it, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
so for me, that's why I prefer not looking at the question to start with, because I want to have what I would, quote unquote, an unbiased understanding of what the passage's main idea is. As much as it can be, right? Unbiased, that is. So I would normally start with straight to the passage. And so the other thing I noticed was, I think you largely, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you largely read every line. And so not just the first paragraph, but through until about halfway through the third paragraph. Is that about right? Yeah. So again, maybe everything I say is not going to work for you, and you want to read the whole passage, and that works for you, and that's what you need to do. But I wouldn't do that personally.
Okay.
What I want to do on that first reading is, I don't want to know every detail in the passage. I actually don't want to know every detail in the passage. All I want to know is what's the main idea, and by extension, like, what's the conclusion, if there is a conclusion. I want to know those two things. And then I also want to have a rough idea of where things are, but not what every detail is. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, totally.
So, and I'm going to be completely honest with you, even like listening to you reading it, I wasn't completely focused on the text. Sorry, just ignore the birdies for a second. That's telling us that we're supposed to take a break now, but we're gonna take a break by chatting. So yeah, even as you were reading it, I was looking at the text and listening to you, and I wasn't completely focused on the text. So I actually don't have a completely great idea of everything in this passage either.
Okay.
So there will be stuff, like, if we're talking about this stuff now, there'll be stuff that, like, I'm actually sort of learning it for the first time reading it as we talk about it as well.
Okay.
No worries, Alan. Thanks. Oh, sorry, Connor. Yeah, I missed the start of the name there. Right. So what I would have done is I would have started with just the first line and just got a good idea in my mind of what that first line is saying, which I think is what you basically did. Arboria is floundering in the global marketplace, incurring devastating losses in market position and profits. So I don't think that's a very complicated sentence. Arboria is a country, and it's struggling in its global place for market position and profits. Okay, and so you read that, you confirmed. I remember you kind of going position and profits. Okay, and I'm not sure, were you taking notes? Were you writing anything down at the same time?
No.
Okay, did you write anything at all? Just out of curiosity.
No, I didn't write anything.
Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do real quick. So I don't know how small that's going to be, because I'm screen sharing and you're seeing my screen on my screen share. Oh, hang on. No, I don't have to do that. I can actually bring up the window itself. 1 second, sorry. How clearly, other than my writing being terrible, how clearly can you see that?
Yeah, it's visible. It's not. It's okay.
Okay,
I can see.
sorry about my writing. It's all scribble. This was not my, like, I didn't write a summary for this because I was just taking notes on what you did, but you would have seen as well, I normally make a bit of a summary. Maybe that's as much for me to make sure I'm processing what I'm reading as it is to have the note. But I think it's also good because I'm pulling out those main concepts that I've been talking about. And so if I get a general question, so a question that's like, what is the author's opinion of something, like, well, something's general, not specific, or, well, let me start that again. What's the main idea of the passage? You get that question. Or
Yeah.
like, what is the general structure of the passage, or something like that, which is not a detail. It's generally about the passage as a whole. I want to be able to answer those questions without looking at the passage again, because that'll be in my summary, because that's the understanding I want to have coming out of my initial reading, because that's also enough for me to be able to find specific answers faster. Now, if I didn't read it at all, and then I just went straight to the question and said, I'm going to answer this question, then general or specific, either way, I have to go read the passage and find that answer by going through the whole passage. But if I already know the general idea, then I don't have to read it again to confirm that. But also, if I know that each paragraph is what each paragraph is doing, then I know which paragraph to go look in for a specific answer. And then the reason I also write it down is because memory can be faulty. I might read a sentence in the first paragraph, like, just to pick random sentences, for example, Arboria faces the prospect of continuing economic loss until Arborian business and political leaders recognize the fundamental differences between Arborian and foreign economic systems. And then just down here somewhere, they contend that free trade is impossible while other nations erect barriers to Arborian exports. What if, in my mind, I somehow mix up something and now, if other nations erect barriers to continuing, like, to recognize, like, fundamental differences in economic systems, like, so what if there's a barrier to the economic system or something? Like, this is a terrible example, but hopefully you get what I mean.
Yeah.
Like,
We tend to mix.
pardon?
Yeah, that is what you're trying to say, right? We tend to mix up some point in the first paragraph and some point in the third paragraph.
It's possible, right? Like, so by writing down the main ideas the main thoughts that I'm looking for, I'm removing some of the risk of me not just like misremembering something. And ultimately, when it comes to the questions, like, I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but when it comes to answering questions, I kind of do the same thing for pretty much every question. And that is, I will read the question, and then, with only one question type as an exception, for every other question type, I read the question, I find the answer, then I come back and look at the answer choices.
Okay.
But I look at the answer choices when I already know the answer. And the reason I do that is I don't want to look here and then go find this, and then look here and go find that, and then look here and go find that. Like, I don't want to be looking in the passage for 5 separate answers, because that's going to take 5 times as much time. What I want is to find the answer to this specific question, and it normally gives you very good clues where to look, right? The question normally is very clear. I'm asking you about this specific thing, and then I go find it. I go find that, read that part, understand the answer to this question from that part, and then look at the answer choices to see which one is that answer. So looking at the answer choices becomes a shorter part because I spend more time looking at the question and finding the actual answer to it. Now that goes for all kinds of questions, like general or specific. If it's a general question, then I'm finding the answer in my summary because I probably don't need to look at the passage again. Sometimes maybe my summary is not perfect. So sometimes I look at my summary and I'm like, do you know what? I probably didn't capture the answer to this question properly. So sometimes I still will go to the passage to confirm like something in the first paragraph. It's almost always in the first paragraph for a general question, but if there's something about the main idea and my summary wasn't quite good enough, I might come back and confirm, oh, it's not free trade versus protectionism. All right, so I want to make sure protectionism is a concept in my mind, or whatever, right? Like, again, random thought, but generally, if it's a general question, mind that. I'm looking for the answer in my summary. If it's a specific question, I'm looking for the answer in the passage. But I'm always finding the answer before I look at the choices. Almost always. And I mentioned that there's one exception. The one exception is sometimes questions will be along the lines of all of the following do this except. And then, you know, I can't look for something that's not in the passage. I can't find the answer that's not in the passage and then say, oh, D is the one that's not there.
Yeah, like the fourth question.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like that. So in that situation, that's the one time where I'm looking like each question, okay, can I find this? Like, yes, rule it out. It's not this one. Can I find this? Yes, it's not this one. Can I find this? No. All right, we'll keep it. Check the other two. Find this, yes. Find this, yes. Okay, so now this is the one that's like not true based on the passage. So C is going to be the answer. Only in the, and I'm not talking about this question, obviously. I'm speaking about that exception type where it's all of these are true except, or something like that. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, totally.
So I just get a mouthful of water. So I basically do that for every single question. And I mean, you might think as well, like it kind of goes against what you might do in the rest of verbal. Like in verbal, you're always ruling out 4 answers instead of choosing one. Quant is different because sometimes it's just easy to find the answer and that's it. In verbal, it's much safer to have a reason that all of the answers are wrong and then pick the one that's not wrong. And I am still doing the same thing, except I'm just doing it in the opposite way. If I know the answer, and like, why don't we actually use question 1 as an example for this? I don't actually remember what you wrote. You picked B. Okay. You picked B.
Yes.
This is a good example of I didn't read this properly, so I wasn't even sure what the answers were as you were answering them. Which of the following best states the difference between free trade and fair trade, as explained in the passage? Well, as I was saying, this is a specific question. Yes. So I don't know the answer to this based on just my summary at the start. And I don't have a summary right now either. But the point is, I'm going to look for this answer now. So free trade and fair trade, I'm going to find like the difference between free trade and fair trade. So what I'm looking for is a definition of free trade and a definition of fair trade. Because somewhere in here, they're going to talk about some difference. So maybe I saw that in my scan, like in my initial reading, sorry. And if I saw that, then maybe I know exactly where to look. But otherwise, I might just have to scan for it. So I'm looking free versus fair. And those words are pretty specific words. It's unlikely that it's going to be like liberated trade or some difference in the word, right? Free trade is a kind of well-known term. Fair trade's kind of a well-known term. So I can actually look for these specific words in the passage, I think. But I don't have to look very hard because when I'm scanning, I very quickly see free and fair trade right here. So I'm going to double check that it's not defined before that though, just in case. Key trade issue is not free trade versus protectionism. All right, so that's not quite the thing. And that doesn't seem to be paragraph 2 doesn't seem to be saying anything about it. So this might be it. Free traders argue that markets should be open and the movement of goods and services across national borders unrestrained. Fair traders assert that access to Arborian markets should be restricted until businesses are granted equal access to foreign markets. Okay. Open and movement of goods and services unrestrained. Fair traders say it should be restricted until everyone has equal access. Okay. So what's the difference? Literally just what I just said out loud. Free traders want no restriction. Yep, no restrictions. Fair traders want restrictions until it can be equal. Now, one of these answers is going to say exactly that. Without me having seen these answers yet, well, I mean, I have, but like, not really. One of these is going to say that, I'm pretty sure. So, free trade requires no trade tariffs whatsoever, whereas fair trade assumes multilateral agreement on tariffs for goods of equal worth. Is it for goods of equal worth? What I just read said about equal access to markets, not about the goods being of the same worth. So I don't like this. So, I mean, if you can see I'm going to go back to my Scratch real quick. So if I was doing this, I would always have ABCDE written down on my Scratch pad. And I literally do this for every single verbal question. I have ABCDE written. I'm planning to take it at home, so I have a whiteboard. So for me, what I will do is I will, like, you know, make my notes and then just wipe that part clean for the next question. So ABCDE is going to be the same the whole time for me. On the booklets, if you're doing it in a test center, you might not be able to like rub it out. I don't think you can. So in that case, maybe it might be worthwhile writing like ABCDE a bunch of times along the bottom before you even start the section. Like in that first screen where you get the booklet before you start and you have like 2 minutes to read the instructions or whatever, maybe you can just write a bunch of them and do it that way, or, you know, if you want to do that. But yeah, that's what I do. And for A, you know, I don't know anything about multilateral agreements because I didn't see anything about that yet. What I just read, I don't think mentioned multilateral agreements unless I completely hallucinated and missed it. So I'm not 100% totally confident that this is definitely wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's wrong because I think tariffs for goods of equal worth is not the point. It's about equal access. So I'm gonna put a cross, but my notation is I put a cross if it's wrong, I put an underline if I think it's a very good answer, and I put a squiggly line if I'm not sure. Like if I just have no idea, or if I think it's a maybe, then I put a squiggly line. That's my notation. Again, some people write smiley faces or crosses and ticks, whatever works. Break over. But for me, I'm going to say that this is a cross. I don't think it's right, but I'm going to put a squiggle underneath it. That's a little signal to me to say, if I end up saying that they're all wrong, I'll come back and check this one. But only because I don't know exactly what multilateral agreements are. But this looks wrong. I don't like this one. Free trade is based on the unrestricted movement of goods across all national boundaries, whereas fair trade is based on a nation's restriction of commerce, with each nation that erects trade barriers to the first nation's exports. Okay, that first half looked awesome. Looked exactly like what I want. Fair trade is based on a nation's restriction of commerce. That also looks really good. Each nation that erects trade barriers to the first nation's exports, that I'm not sure about. So let's have a look. They contend that free trade is impossible while other nations erect barriers to Arborian exports. Should be restricted until Arborian businesses are granted equal access to foreign markets, with each nation that erects trade barriers to the first nation's exports. Right, okay. That didn't make sense to me the first time I read it, but now that I read it back, it kind of does make sense. Granted equal access to foreign markets. So what they're saying is Arborian markets should be closed or restricted until Arborian businesses can access these other countries' markets. So what this is saying is more or less the same thing. Fair trade is based on a nation's restriction of commerce, with a nation until they get rid of barriers. So barriers is just another way of saying restriction to the First Nations exports. So B looks like exactly what I'm looking for, so I keep it. And like I think you more or less did this, so I'm not going to go through every answer choice and eliminate them, but I think you more or less did go through them and eliminate them for similar reasons. The reason I went through the detail that I just did was to show that I could very confidently say that B is a good answer based on only reading that much. And even actually maybe even that line. But that's what I read to answer this question. And again, I would have checked C, checked D, and checked E to rule them out. But I can be very confident that B is correct once I've ruled out the rest, because I found this answer here, and the question told me to look here. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, but what I fear of is, maybe I might miss something else in the first paragraph, or maybe some key details that I miss in the second paragraph. So I read those.
No, I mean, I
The
definitely get
fear
it.
of missing any details will actually make me read the entire thing.
I can appreciate that. That's totally fair. And like, I have that same thing. Like, I still get that same feeling. So sometimes I do spend more time on a question because I'm confirming something because I'm worried about it when maybe I don't need to. But that's normal. I think it's normal.
Yeah.
The more that, I guess maybe the more you practice it, again, this is assuming that you want to do this. But if you
Actually, may I interrupt?
yeah, please, what's up?
Yeah. See, after seeing the question, you outrightly jump to, like, yeah. Of course, you have considered first paragraph and second paragraph, but what my thought process was, I have seen this free trade wording in the first paragraph.
Yeah,
So
I
I
did
thought
go and check
maybe
that.
it should have been, something might be associated with that word too. Because if I miss that, and if I go and only stick to the third paragraph, I might miss what it is saying in the first paragraph,
Yeah,
the free trade word, right?
no, for sure. So I think there's two things I would say about that. The first is I did check this. I came and I read this
Yeah.
line.
Yes, you checked that. I
Um,
agree.
and the second
But
thing I would say is I'm not just looking for the word free trade. I'm not just looking for anything about it. I'm looking very specifically for the difference between free trade and fair trade. And so what that really means is I'm looking for a definition of one and a definition of the other one, because that's going to tell me how they are different. So if I read paragraph 3 and this is very clearly telling me free trade is one thing, fair trade is another thing, this is the definition of those two things, this is how they are different, the entire first two paragraphs could be completely about free trade and fair trade. I don't care. The only thing I care about is the difference between them, which is this definition, and I have that here.
yeah, okay, got that.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like,
it made sense, but maybe I should practice a bit more
oh,
to
totally,
actually.
totally. I mean, it's funny because Ohm said the same thing. Like, I really wish he was online because it would be better to hear it from him rather than from me, like saying stuff that he
Okay.
said to me. But like he said the same thing where when he first saw me answering questions, he thought, "Oh, there's no way that can ever work." And then I got all the questions right, and he's like, "Well, maybe it can work." And then he saw it again, and like, okay, I need to find out what he's doing. Not because it's the way that he had to do it, but just because he wanted to see if it would work for him. Um, and I'm happy to say I think it has been helping. So, but yeah, I won't say more about that. I'll let him talk about that himself. Um, but yeah, he basically said the same thing. Like reading this, you go, oh, how could I possibly answer the question by only reading this? But I mean, I hope that I kind of just showed it can work. And just if you try it, and the practice is going to be making sure, am I answering this? That's what the practice is. It's not just find free trade and fair trade. It's, can I answer the question with the thing I'm looking, like that's what I'm looking for. And so and that's why I said it out loud. When I read this question, I said, okay, which of the following best states the difference between free trade and fair trade as explained in the passage? Okay, so the difference between free trade and fair trade, I want a definition of free trade and a definition of fair trade, because that will tell me how they are different. I said that out loud before I looked at the passage at all. So I'm looking in the passage for definitions of free trade and fair trade. So that's why when I looked at this line, the problem is not free trade versus blah. I don't care about that. That's not telling me what free trade is. That's what I want to know. This isn't talking about free trade or fair trade at all. Don't care about that paragraph. Okay, here we go. They seem paralyzed by free trade and fair trade. Free traders argue that this should be blah, blah, blah. Okay, so this is what free trade is. Now I have a definition of free trade. This is what I want. I don't need more than that. Well, except for the definition of fair trade. But yeah, and like I said, arguably this next line would make it easier as well because it mentions barriers. So it might make it easier to rule out the question that talked about barriers. Sorry, it might help you find B mentioning barriers as well. But anyway, my point is though that it's all in this block.
Yeah.
So that's the thing to get fine-tuned at, is the very specifically what do I want to know, and I wanted to know what these two things are.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is, for me at least, even if I read the passage completely, every word from start to finish, if I did that at the start, I probably still would go back and check. Like, I'd probably remember that they talked about free trade versus fair trade. I'd probably remember it was in this paragraph. But when I look at this question, I'm probably still going to come back and check it. So if I'm going to read this again anyway, like, again, this is just me. Maybe not everyone has to do that. But if I'm going to come back and read this again anyway, just to be sure, I may as well just read it for the first time when I'm answering it. Like, because if this question doesn't exist, then why read this? I don't need to know this anymore if that question is not one of the questions. That's kind of part of my logic as well. And then again, I wouldn't trust my own memory to say that I read this passage once and remembered the answer to this perfectly. I wouldn't trust my memory for that either. Anyway, so that was a very long description of kind of how you approached the passage and question 1. I'm trying to think if there was anything specific with question 2. The thing I noticed with question 2 was you did what I would have done, minus one thing, which is I think the trap that you were worried about. Oh, I shouldn't use the word trap. The oversight you were worried about making. It can be inferred that the author of the passage would agree with which of the following about multilateral trade negotiations. What would the author of the passage say about multilateral trade negotiations? You did exactly what I did, which was look for multilateral trade negotiations. And you're looking for words that are similar because some, like maybe multilateral meetings or multilateral discussions or like multi-country, like multiple country negotiation, like it might not be these exact words. So
yes,
when you're scanning, you're not looking for these exact words. It's a bit different here. Free trade and fair trade is a little bit different. Like you can kind of be more confident that free trade...
they're kind of definitions.
Exactly. This might not necessarily be those exact words. So what does the author think about it? That's like, it's a specific question because it's specifically about this, but it's not like, what's the definition, or is it a good thing or a bad thing, or like whatever. It's not a very, very specific question about what would be the effect of multilateral trade negotiations to the economy of Arboria. Like that's a very specific question about, you know, what would this actually do? this is a kind of like, I'd almost call it like a general question about a specific thing, almost. But I don't want to muddy the waters by mixing up the terms. But what does the author think about it? Okay, for that, I kind of just need to see them talk about it. That's what I'm looking for right now. I want to see something that is like an opinion about this. So to do that, I need to find it. And to find it, I'm looking for similar keywords, not necessarily the exact same ones. Anyway, I think you more or less did that too. So scanning around, I'm not seeing multilateral or negotiations. I'm not seeing that here. I'm not seeing it here either. What I actually did when I looked at this myself while you were doing it too, I missed it in this paragraph to begin with, and I came here and I saw it first here, I think. Multilateral trade policy. I thought, okay, multilateral trade policy, is that negotiations? And then I thought, okay, well maybe like, oh, and then I saw it here. I'm like, oh, actually, hang on, no, multilateral. And I came back and found it here. I saw, oh, multilateral negotiations. All right, that looks like it's talking about what we're talking about. So multilateral negotiations are the most effective way to resolve pressing trade issues. Okay, so that sounds like an opinion, right? So that's good. But this isn't a list, so I'm just going to make sure, like, what is this a list of? Both sides base their positions on the same two outdated premises. So this is an outdated premise, according to the author. So according to the author, the idea that multilateral negotiations are the most effective way to resolve pressing trade issues, that idea is outdated, according to the author. So that's what the author of the passage would most likely agree with. This idea is outdated, is what they would say. Now, the one missing step, I think you did everything I did. The one missing step was recognizing this sentence here. Otherwise, I think you did everything exactly how I would have done it. And if I had have done, like, as in, if this line wasn't here, for example, if this line was, you know, clearly these two things are, and then 1, 2, then you got the right answer, I think. They're the most effective way to resolve trade problems, most effective way to resolve pressing trade issues. Boom. That looks like a great answer.
Yes.
And that's why that answer is there. In case anyone misses this, that answer is there. But what we're looking for is that idea is outdated. All right, so we're ruling out A.
Yeah.
With B, most effective in dealing with fair trade issues between nations. That almost looks like verbatim the same thing. So maybe they're giving us two options and they're trying to say, oh, the trick here is which one is right or something. Maybe that's what, so they're trying to make it look like the answer is still right, but like which one? Maybe that's what they're saying. But yeah, they're the most effective in dealing with fair trade issues between nations. I mean, yeah, maybe if it's nation specific is the big difference there, I suppose. I don't know. Either way, they're both wrong, so I'm ruling them out. But yeah, anyway. They have only recently begun to make an impact on world trade. No, I don't think that's what we need. Maybe this... Now, and this is an example of... Like, what I'm about to say is an example of how I deal with that fear you mentioned, right? Now, when I found this, I saw that, and I saw this. I am very confident in my mind that... Well, where else would I be confident, I guess? I'm very confident that the answer to this question, 495 or whatever it is, the answer to this question is in this block of text. It is going to be that people think it's an effective way to do blah, 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 and that's outdated. I'm very confident that's the answer. Like, the answer is going to be something in that. But in case it's not, they have only recently begun to make an impact on world trade. I do not know if that's true. Like, that could be true. It's completely separate from what I am looking for. but it might be true. And so, like if I bring up my scratch pad again quickly, for this question, here's what I would have written. I am 100% sure it's not A and it's not B, because it's the opposite in my mind. C, that could be true. I don't think it's the answer, but it could be true. So I'm not going to just completely say definitely not. I'm going to give it a squiggle line because, yeah, I don't like it. And actually, probably a squiggle line with a cross underneath it, because I'm pretty sure it's going to be outdated premise. I'm pretty sure it's not this, but I'm giving it a squiggle line as a reminder. If I get to E and I've said no on all of them, well, I have to come back to something, and it's not going to be A or B. So I'm putting a squiggle line to say, if I have to come back to something, this is something I had no idea about. If I find it, maybe this is true, and then if it's true, then the author would agree with it. So that's why I give this like a squiggle line, and that's how I deal with that fear, because I will come back to it if I need to. That's how I deal with that. Does that sort of make sense?
Yes, totally.
So if I show my scratch again, this is why I have the squiggly line here, and probably with an X under it, because I'm quite confident. If I was not as confident, if it was like literally like, I have no idea, maybe this is true, maybe it's not, I would leave it as just a squiggly line. And by the way, the reason it's a squiggly line and not, oh, I don't know if it's true, like whatever, if I don't know, then that probably means it's not the answer, because I'm only looking at it after I found the answer, right? Like for the first question, it was here. For this question, the answer is here. I'm only looking at these answer choices once I found it, like once I know the answer already. So if I read something and it's like completely new, I've never seen this before, well then it's probably not the answer. But that's why I give it a squiggle. Again, whatever thing you want to use, I use a squiggle. But I give it a squiggle because I have no idea. I can't say for sure it's wrong, but I don't think it's right because I already think the answer is what I think it is, because I found it, not because I'm guessing, because I found it. Anyway, I'll move on. So with D, Arborian reliance on multilateral trade negotiations, while inappropriate in the past, is inadequate for today's global marketplace. Well, that sounds pretty good. What's another way of saying outdated? Was good in the past, not anymore. This looks like exactly what I need. So I like D, and what I do for that is I underline it. I give it a straight underline to say, this is a good answer, I'm keeping it. Sometimes I have more than one with an underline, which means I have to I come back at the end to compare, to figure out which one's the best one. But anyway, in this case, I don't think that's going to happen. The principles of multilateral trade negotiations are incompatible with current Arborian foreign trade policy. Incompatible is a very strong phrasing, right? So coming back to my scratch pad, I had an X here. I was like pretty sure it's not that. With E, if I was looking at E just straight, I would say that's probably a squiggle because it's outdated. Saying that it's the best way is outdated is not the same as saying it's completely incompatible. It can't work. That's not the same thing. Now, the reason it's not a cross is I didn't read the whole passage, so I can't say for sure it's definitely that the author thinks it's compatible. But so I can't say for sure it's a wrong, so I can't give it a cross. But I'm pretty sure it's not right. At the end of and so I give it a squiggle line. And if this was A, I'd give it a squiggle and keep going, and then come back to check it if the rest were all crosses. The fact that I already have D, and D is really good. Like D is exactly what I wanted. And like not just because it sounds similar, like it's exactly the meaning I was looking for. Outdated premise that it's the best way to do it. So relying on it while it was good in the past is inadequate for today's global marketplace. This is essentially another way of saying it's outdated. That's exactly what I want. In the actual exam, I would probably just pick D and move on at this point. But if I'm really like paranoid, I might check quickly to say incompatible. Is there anything here about incompatible? World trade is no longer dominated. No, I don't see incompatible. No. In that case, I'm even happier with D. But yeah, it just depends on how confident you are on D, I suppose. But yeah. Does that make sense? And I'm kind of assuming that I'm getting these right, but B was that one, yep. And D is this one. Okay, good. it'd be embarrassing if I said everything I just said and then it was wrong. How does that make sense?
Yeah, it is totally making sense now.
Yeah. So that's the main way I deal with the fear. So I hope that kind of helps. Like, if I don't know, I can't say it's wrong. But what I can say is it's probably not right because I'm looking for the thing which is the answer and I already know the answer. So that's why. And then so if we look at 3 quickly, I think 3, okay, so I don't remember too much about 3 jumping out. I think, like I said, with 2, the main thing was this outdated. I think if you see that line, I think you get this right. So that's just like one of those things to sort of keep in mind. Like, okay, this is number 2 of something. Well, I just want to just make sure. Like, sometimes you'll have to read the line before it. Sometimes you'll have to read the line after it, just to make sure that what you've read makes sense in some context. So you might have to do that sometimes. That's maybe a good tip in general. And then what was this question? Which of the following statements best summarizes the author's opinion of free traders and fair traders? So the author's opinion of free traders and fair traders, this is another one of those weird ones that's like, how does the author feel about a thing? Isn't that the same as question 1? No, that's the difference. Yeah, this is like basically question 2 is that. It's like, how does the author feel about these statements? Anyway, which of these is the author's opinion of the actual traders themselves? All right. Well, I'm looking for the discussion of those traders, and I'm not looking for what they are. This time I'm looking specifically for something from the author's perspective, which describes these free traders and fair traders, because whatever the language they use will give me some clues about their opinion. And this, I think, is pretty quick. Key trade issue is not that. Okay, that's not about the traders. This is not about the traders either. We get back to paragraph 3 again. And by the way, I'm scanning everything because I don't have a summary. If I have a summary, the summary probably tells me free trade versus fair trade is in paragraph 3, and then I go straight to paragraph 3. The only reason I've scanned this every time is because I don't have a summary. Anyway. Conflict between free trade and fair trade. Okay. Oh, here we go. Here's an opinion right here. Very first line. And actually, this is the thing. Which of the following statements best summarizes the author's opinion of free traders and fair traders? I can almost guarantee you what I'm about to say would verbatim be written in my summary. Because the first line of paragraph 3 says, Arboria's trade policy seems paralyzed by the relentless conflict between proponents of free and fair trade. That is a very strong statement. The entire policy is paralyzed by this conflict between these 2 groups. Some summary of that sentence would be in my summary for sure. And if this says which of the following statements best summarizes the author's opinion of free traders and fair traders, I am going to look for an answer that says Arboria's trade is completely frozen because of them. That's the author's opinion. That's what I'm going to look for. And so we've read this paragraph a bunch of times already, but ignoring that fact, even if I haven't read that at all, that's a strong opinion about proponents of. And so if you don't know what the word proponent means, that might be a little bit harder to pick up. Then maybe you read a bit more and try to figure it out through context. Like, oh, free traders say this, fair traders say that, and then, but based on that, this is blah, blah, blah. Oh, hang on, all of this is talking about the opinions of free traders and fair traders. Therefore, oh, free traders and fair traders, they're the ones paralyzing the policy. So if you don't know what the word proponent means, maybe you have to keep reading to get context. But if you do know what it means, you literally only need to read this one line, I think, because I actually, again, don't really remember what these answers were. I wasn't actually really catching exactly what these answers were. So the free and the fair traders continuing debate provides a healthy and effective forum for examining Arborian trade policy. That's the opposite of what we want. It's paralyzed because of them. It's not a healthy and effective forum. So going back to my ABCDE, and what I would do on the day is, again, I'd just wipe it off the whiteboard and use it again. Definitely not A. Proponents of fair trade are essentially correct, while those who advocate free trade are not. I don't think that's what it's saying. It's basically saying it's just a conflict. If I'm not sure, this could be true, so this might be the answer, but for now, I'm going to see if the paralyzing market is one of the answers. So I'm going to give this a squiggle. And the reason I'm giving it, again, the reason I'm giving it a squiggle is because I don't know 100% for sure that this is wrong. This might be the author's opinion as well. But I do already know, in very strong terms, the author's opinion is that the market was paralyzed by them. And not just because the language is strong. This is the first line of the sentence. That tells me this whole paragraph is about this. That's a big deal. That's a really big deal in the author's opinion. Because GMAT always uses good writing, and good writing has a topic sentence. So this whole paragraph is about the idea that these guys, their conflict, paralyzed the market. Geez, I'm talking a lot. Sorry, I'll try and speed it up. Or tell me to speed up or slow down. But yeah. So I don't know for sure it's not B. I'm going to give it a squiggle, but I don't think it's that because I'm pretty sure it's going to be about paralyzing the market. The proponents of free trade are better able to deal with the current economic problems than are the fair traders. I mean, that could be true as well. I don't think so. I don't like it, but I'm just going to keep it just in case it's true. As in, keep it with a squiggle, not with a straight line. Neither the free nor the fair traders can come up with a workable trade policy because neither takes multilateral negotiations into account. Neither can come up with a workable trade policy is not quite the same as saying that the conflict is the reason it's not working. Maybe they both have good ideas, but the fact that they keep arguing means that neither one of their ideas can ever happen. So I don't really like that either, so I might keep that as a squiggle as well. Hopefully it's E. The proponent, because if it's not E, then I have to go back to the passage. The proponents of both free and fair trade have based their positions on out-of-date premises that do not reflect current economic conditions. Am I reading the right question? Yeah, I am. Okay. The proponents of both free and fair trade have based their positions on out-of-date premises that do not reflect current economic conditions. All right. So we had that situation where I didn't like any of the other answers. So I was looking for the market was paralyzed. Didn't find it. Okay. Well, at least I know I don't have to check A again. I'm not looking at that at all. So now what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to read through these four again to find it in the passage. I'm going to realize, okay, I jumped the gun. That wasn't the opinion. I'm going to look further for more of an opinion. Again, I'm looking for the author's opinion, not anyone else's. So free traders argue something, don't care what the free traders say. Fair traders assert something, don't care what they say. What I want to know is the next line from the author's perspective. They contend, okay, so this is still more talking about what they say. Don't care about that either. Both are correct. Okay, now we know the author's opinion about whatever they said. Both are correct. Fair trade requires something, requires equal access, and equal access leads to free trade. Okay. Both sides base their positions on the same two outdated premises. Okay. Outdated premises, that's starting to sound familiar. I just saw that in answer choice E. I'm going to check these really quickly. So in the end, I read this whole paragraph to answer this question. But at the end of the day, if this was the only question about this paragraph, then I only read the whole thing because of this question. If we had 3 questions and they're all about different paragraphs, then I might never need to read all of that. So anyway, global commerce is conducted under that. It's we already know it's not that. We know it's this last part. Negotiations are the most effective way to resolve pressing trade issues. Well, actually, it's not even necessarily what these things are. Both sides base their positions. Actually, I don't even need to read them. Sorry, I misspoke just now. I don't even need to read 1 and 2. Both sides base their positions on the same 2 outdated premises. Proponents of both sides base their positions on out-of-date premises that do not reflect current economic conditions. So it's clearly going to be E. Yes. Anyway, I talked a lot. Sorry if that was too much for anyone, or too much detail, or if I rambled about something you didn't want me to ramble about. But does that make sense? And did I cover everything you wanted that you would want to cover for that?
Yes, but what if you got to read this both assumptions are wrong statement in the last paragraph?
What if I don't read this?
The first sentence in the last paragraph.
Oh,
How would you relate it?
both assumptions are wrong. Oh, I see. So this is now talking about these 2 assumptions, right?
Yes.
So that is essentially agreeing with this. So, well, actually, it's not just agreeing with it. It's agreeing with it and increasing the strength.
Rejecting, right?
Exactly. It's rejecting it. Outdated, it could be old and not 100% correct anymore, but still useful or something. You know what I mean? Like, if I have a 10-year-old computer, it's outdated, but I can still put Excel on it, right? Both assumptions are wrong. That's point blank. These are just false. Or in my computer analogy, it doesn't turn on. Like, both assumptions are wrong. So it's supporting kind of the author's opinion. They're outdated. They're actually just straight wrong. So yeah, the answer choice here could have said proponents of free and fair trade base their positions on premises that are completely wrong or completely false or something. It could have said that, and that would also be correct, I think.
Now, after reading that both assumptions are wrong, can you look at option D?
Neither the free nor the fair traders can come up with a workable trade policy. Well, this is where you have to get very specific with the words. For the answer to be right, every part of it has to be right, and it's not enough for just some of it to be right. Now, this I'd say is correct. Probably. It's probably the author's opinion that they can't come up with a workable trade policy. But is it because they didn't take into account multilateral negotiations? Well, no, they did. They considered multilateral negotiations right here. The problem is they considered them the wrong way, because their opinion of it, or the idea they have about it, is wrong. But they considered it. Okay. They did consider it. So they took it into account.
Okay, got it.
So that's like a thing to be very careful with wording. That kind of thing, obviously it comes up in RC as well, comes up a lot in CR. Like, you have to be very careful with the wording, especially in CR, but obviously like this question, you have to be careful here as well. And the other part of it is, they never actually said that they can't come up with a plan. They just said that the problem is they keep disagreeing. Now, neither the free nor the fair can come up with a plan, is sort of saying that separately, again, this is maybe being careful with the words. This is saying that separately, the free traders, they can't come up with anything. And separately, the fair traders can't come up with anything. Well, I don't think we know that. I don't think the author ever says that. All they're saying is whatever they do come up with, the fact that they never agree means nothing happens, like it can't be done, kind of thing.
Got it.
So,
Meaning wise.
Yeah. So there's kind of two parts to it. If you're careful with the words, what does it exactly say? You don't want, like with RC more than CR, so I don't want to confuse the two topics, but with RC more than CR, you will be able to find the answer much more clearly more often, I think. Like you don't have to add assumptions very, very often. Like you don't have to add assumptions to RC questions very often at all. And like that's a big mistake in CR as well, actually. I think a lot of the questions I still get wrong in CR is because I've got an assumption in my head that I didn't realize was an assumption. But yeah, at the end of the day, you want to minimize how often you make up an assumption and put it in. So if we said, okay, the author's opinion is probably that free and fair traders can't do anything. Yeah, probably, right? That might be true. Like multilateral negotiations into account. Oh, that's probably why. You know, like if I'm saying probably why, then it's not, I don't know that, right? So I can't really pick it yet.
Okay.
Yeah. Whereas this one, I found the answer. Well, I mean, here's the thing. At first, I looked for an answer that wasn't there. Then when I realized it wasn't there, that's where these squiggles come in case that happens. All right. Well, I'm definitely not wasting any more time on A. So that's a positive at least, right?
Yes.
Because A was flat out wrong based on what I did know already. So now I need to find out what don't I know yet? Because these all could be true. I just don't know why they're true yet. So what don't I know? We'll keep reading. Where's the next opinion? False, outdated premises. Both assumptions are wrong. Here's the other opinion. Now I just need to find it. Anyway. Sorry, I know I talk a lot, but yeah, did that answer that question as well?
Yes, totally.
Awesome. So maybe let's do this. Let's look at question 4 together.
Yeah.
And then we'll look at a very short passage with like 1 or 2 questions. But let's do this one together. So yeah, you read it and then tell me. Well, you just read it and tell me what you want to do and what you want to look at and what you want to think, like what you're thinking.
Okay. The author mentions all of the following as characteristic of world trade in the mid 1940s, except. So now we'll go to a place where 1940s is there in the passage.
Okay.
So that's in the second.
Perfect. Okay.
That's in the. Yeah.
Yep.
So it is saying Arboria is operating with an absolute trade policy, an artifact of the mid 1940s when Arboria and Orfland dominated the global economy. Tariffs were the principal obstacle to trade, and Arborian supremacy was uncontested in virtually all industries. Okay.
So personally,
that's fine. Yeah.
Personally, I'm pretty confident the answers will all be in this one sentence, right? So I'm probably going to just I'm going to find 4 of these here. Maybe if you really want to, you could just like literally do this and just look for 1940 anywhere else if you weren't 100% sure. And then I've literally in like 2 seconds seen that it's not anywhere else. So I'm pretty confidently just going to say A, is it here? B, is it here? C, is it here? That's pretty much all I'm doing in that one sentence.
Yes.
So yeah, go ahead.
So it said like Arboria and Wolfland dominated the global economy. The first option says Arboria played a major role in the global marketplace. So
what do you think about A?
Maybe I'll hold on to that. it played a major role. It dominated the global economy. So
Take 1 second. Sorry. What exactly was the question asking?
all of the following except. So yeah, we can. It is showing that. I mean, we can reject A,
Right.
and
This
accordingly, we can also reject B because both were dominating, right?
right.
So
So
see, tariffs were the main
just
obstacle
before
to
you go on,
trade.
just to connect it back to what I was saying before, this is that one exception where you find every answer, as opposed to when I would find the answer and then look at the answer choices. This is literally all of these are true except one, so we're finding all of them, but we still found the right place to look before we looked at the choices.
Yes.
So yeah. Anyway, sorry, go on.
So yeah. So the options is tariffs were the main obstacle to trade, and yes, that is also mentioned in the paragraph. Tariffs were the principal obstacle to trade, so we can reject C.
Yep, almost exactly those words.
Yeah, the fair trade economies dominated international trade. So I don't think that has been mentioned.
Fair trade
So we can
economies
hold on
dominated
to D
international trade.
and E.
Okay.
Arborian manufacturers were unsurpassed in most industries. So Arborian supremacy was uncontested in virtually all industries. So this is talking about all, and this is talking about most.
Well, virtually all.
Yeah, virtually all. So yeah, E is also on the similar lines with the passage.
So you might want to double check.
Double check. Yes. Okay. Okay.
Manufacturing versus, like, as in, I'm not saying that anything you did is wrong, by the way. Literally just saying this is my thought process, right? Like, as it happens.
Okay.
Like, I'm thinking, do I need to confirm Arborian manufacturers against whatever is said in the passage? Did they say manufacturers in the passage? Do I need to check
No, they
this?
did not. That. So yeah, they didn't mention the word manufacturer. So yeah,
Um,
true that.
but it is
But
also right. Go on. Sorry, I don't want to say it if you're going to
no,
say
but
it.
fair trade economies dominated international trade. But did it also mention that Arborian, Wolfland were fair trade?
Oh, sorry, no. Before you go back to D,
Yeah.
still on E. Like, I flagged the word manufacturer because, again, we want to be very careful with words, right? So for me,
Yes.
when I saw E and it said Arborian manufacturers, I'm like, okay, I need to be really careful. Am I looking for do I need to, like, check this? And it's literally, do I need to or not, before I even actually check it, if that makes sense. So you were right. The passage in the highlighted text there, it doesn't say manufacturers at all.
Yes.
But what does it say?
Yeah, I mean, it says Arborian supremacy was, together. Okay, Arborian together is, it was not uncontested, or what do we say, like, unsurpassed. But it is picking one from the Arborian supremacy, right? Manufacturers may be one kind of thing.
Exactly, right? They're
Yeah.
saying that Arborea was dominant in almost every industry.
Yes.
Well, that includes manufacturing.
Yes. Yes.
So, now, I guess that, put it this way, that makes it like a bit of a maybe, because, like, is that exactly the same thing as saying, well, what if it was almost all industries, but the one that it wasn't was actually manufacturing? Then, so for me, this is probably a squiggle.
Yes. But yeah, that is true.
Until I check that, or otherwise, if I have a reason for D. So I'm kind of looking at D versus E now. But sorry, what were you going to say?
Yeah, that is what I was going to say. Maybe we can strongly eliminate D, so that
Right.
we'll be left with E.
Right. And remember, this is an accept. So as soon
Yes.
as we confirm one of these two, the other one's the right answer.
Yes.
So here's the thing: we have strong clues that this is probably right. So as in this is probably true in the passage, meaning it's probably crossed off as an option, because it's almost saying exactly that. So yeah, so we might be able to confirm, like if something here was talking about this whole passage is about manufacturing. If it said manufacturing up here in the first paragraph, we would know that in our summary, I suppose, or just from reading the first paragraph. But we'd know, oh, this whole passage is talking about manufacturing. So even though they only said, all industries, they meant all manufacturing industries. So we might know that already. We don't, but if we did, then that might already be a cross. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, and then otherwise, like my go-to here is my first thought. I'm not sure this is not necessarily the best advice. It's just what I think I would have done. Is because I have this question mark, and I've asked myself that question. I've said, okay, Arborian manufacturers were unsurpassed in most industries. Well, now they're saying most industries, and it's like, okay, there's multiple manufacturing industries, so it's not necessarily the manufacturing industry. So if we come back to the line we were focused on, which was, here, Arborian supremacy, uncontested in virtually all industries, well, this is starting to look better, because now it's not just the manufacturing industry is possibly the one that wasn't. Now it's like there's a bunch of manufacturing industries. That's more lining up with the idea of all industries, manufacturing industries. I don't know. I'm starting to think this is already probably a cross. So now my squiggle gets across. Like,
Okay.
if you follow what I mean, like, it's still a squiggle, but like it's like, oh, this is looking better and better. So, and the last thing I would probably check is I would just really quickly scan, is the word manufacture anywhere? And I don't see it. So I don't think I'm going to get anything clearer than what I already know. Yeah, so I don't see the word manufacture anywhere. So I get that last part, probably not the best use of the time. I don't know. But you can come back and go, can I find this there somewhere?
Yes.
Now, fair trade economies dominated international trade. We weren't sure, so we kept it. We got a straight underline.
Yes.
Now what?
Now we have to make sure that fair trade economy is dominated. I mean, whether Arboria or Wolfland is a fair trade economy or not, right? Because they both dominated.
Well, here's what we know. We know Arboria and Wolfland dominated the global economy.
The global, yes.
Now, do we think dominating the global economy is just looking one part at a time? But yeah, it's the same as dominating international trade. Yep, I think so. So what we then need to know is fair trade economies dominated international trade. In the 1940s, were Arboria and Wolfland fair trade economies? That's what we need to find out now. And that's probably up here. Incurring devastating losses. Arboria's trade policy, and now we're going to find out what it was. And I'm reading it now, but only because I didn't read it before. But we would have already read this before, and it would be in our summary. The key trade issue is not free trade versus protectionism, but diminishing trade versus expanding trade. Okay, so that actually doesn't tell us exactly what it was in the 40s. Since the 40s, the circumstances have shifted radically, but the trade policy has not. Okay, so Arborian trade policy is the same as it was in the 40s. So as soon as they tell us what it is now, we know what it was in the 40s.
It will.
And maybe we have to go down like right to the end for that. I'm not sure actually.
But it is definitely not a free trade economy, right? Arboria, the first paragraph, it said it is not a free trade one.
Oh, okay. Thank you. The key trade issue is not free. Oh, sorry. It doesn't say that it's not free trade. Are you talking about this line? This is saying that the issue is not free versus protectionist or free versus fair. Protectionism, we now can understand, means fair trade. Protectionism meaning putting up barriers, restrictions. So it's not, the key trade issue is not free trade versus protectionism, but diminishing trade versus expanding trade. So that's saying what the issue is. And the problem is Arboria's trade policy. Yeah, so all we need to know basically is Arboria a fair trade economy? At today or in the past? Arboria's trade policy seems paralyzed by the relentless conflicts between two. So their policy is paralyzed, so they're not one or the other. Probably. So this is still paralyzed. It doesn't actually say which one they are. Oh, here we go. World trade is no longer dominated by the free trade economies. Nearly 75% is conducted by economic systems operating with principles at odds with those of Arboria. So now we do know that Arboria is free trade. So unfortunately, we had to read a lot more of this than I would have normally liked. But that's kind of what you have to do. But we know for sure now, fair trade economies dominated international trade. They did, because Arboria was, in the 40s, a fair trade economy, and they dominated. So they did dominate international trade in the 1940s. So that's true.
Yeah.
Which means the one that we already liked is definitely our answer now. Well, hopefully. We'll just check the answer. Oh, sorry. As in, we can rule it out. Sorry, we can rule A out is what I meant. Yeah. Wow. I verbally made the exact mistake that would be easy to make in the exam. So good lesson there as well. But yeah, like mentions all of the following, mentions these three, mentions this. Oh, hold up. Wait, no. Oh, opposite of what I just said. It mentions this. D is true. So E is actually our answer. Shouldn't it be the answer?
Yeah, that is what. Yeah.
Fair trade economies dominate international trade. Well, oh, okay. Here we go. This is another good lesson. So I just made a mistake. Do you want to tell me what the mistake was I just made? I could have actually got this question wrong if I took this on the test, because I legitimately made this mistake. I made a very key one. It's about being careful with words. There is one specific thing that here's the thing. This is the thing that's annoying me, actually. I noticed it, but I still chose it because I still thought it was better than E. So, economies. Fair trade economies dominated international trade.
Okay. That is generalization kind of thing.
Well, we know Arboria and Wharfland dominated. And we know Arboria was a fair trade economy. I added an assumption, so is Wharfland.
Yeah.
We don't know that Wharfland was a fair trade economy.
Yes, that is true.
If Wharfland was a free trade economy, then the international trade was dominated by two economies across both types. So I made a very key mistake about being careful with words just now. So there you go.
But in general, how would you deal with a question like this when you need to manage time also, right?
Well, the thing is, I would have gotten this wrong, right? I would have picked E as we're unsurpassed in most industries. I would have been picking E because I thought I found this, right? I thought I found this. The thing is, even in E, like we liked E as something, like we thought E was kind of in there, right? Like we were pretty sure E was in there. And it was getting very nitpicky about, okay, manufacturing industries, all industries, and can we say that because virtually every industry was unsurpassed, that includes most, like manufacturers were unsurpassed, like the manufacturers were unsurpassed in most of those industries. Like, can we say that it includes it? We were getting very nitpicky about those words, which I think was good to notice. But then I decided for some reason to not be nitpicky with the word economies. And the thing is, I noticed it, but I made the mistake that GMAT Ninja likes to talk about: don't fall in love. Because I was like, oh, did we catch this? I was like, I noticed this, but I didn't give it enough of a moment to think, do we know it about Warfland? And this is saying both, right? Both dominated. Are they both fair trade? Do we know Warfland is fair trade? Like, I didn't stop to give it that extra 2 seconds. I did notice it. I noticed economies, and it actually came to my mind at least twice, but I didn't stop to do it. So I would have made a mistake. I would have just made that mistake and gotten this wrong. But it's a very clear sign, like, economies, fair trade economies. Well, if we know that it was Arboria and Warfland that dominated, I now need to confirm both. Confirming one is not enough. I have to confirm that Warfland was as well. Otherwise, this is not in there. Does that sort of make sense? What are you thinking about that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, but like, I mean, you have carefully, been looking after manufacturers and all, but I have outrightly, neglected that word actually. So this is something I need to work on.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like, if the answer is D is not in there. I've already lost the question. Which question was it? 4?
Yeah, the 4th question.
Here we are. Yeah. So if this is one that's not in there, we're saying this one is in there. I mean, you would have gotten that part right. I only really mentioned it because I think it's a good habit to be practicing it. And annoyingly, though, I got myself mixed up because I needed to do the exact same thing with the word economies, and I didn't.
Okay. Yeah.
So you can't do it half of the time. That's I guess the main point, because you'll end up convincing yourself that the wrong answer is right because you've convinced yourself that, oh, maybe it's not this, right? But economies is very clear. Like, this was like, oh, manufacturers, that's included, right? Like, that's part of every industry, so probably. This is like very clearly multiple economies dominated the trade, and we know it was 2, so they both better be fair trade. Otherwise, this is not true.
Yes.
So, like, this is actually much clearer. And if I had that same level, and if I did that exactly what I just said, if I did that, then all this doubt about E just disappears. Like, oh, that doubt's gone because everything else is out.
Yes.
So, yeah, probably would have been better to not waste so much time on E, come back and check D. Because the thing is, though, right, played a major role. We were able to rule these out because we knew, oh, they dominated the market. So this is probably the one to check. We already knew that. Like, we already knew this part. So that's probably the part to check. So E was probably a bad choice to look at before D, like, in more detail.
Yeah.
But this is a good practice session. Okay, rather than looking at another passage, though, we might have to leave doing summaries for another day. I think let's finish off these questions, and we'll treat it as like how to tackle the question part, and then we can talk more about passage stuff another time, maybe. Like, like, what I mean by that is like the summaries. We can talk about that another time, I suppose.
Sure. Okay, totally fine.
So yeah, let's just answer the rest of these questions. And
yeah,
wow, this has already gone way longer than I had hoped, but that's okay. So yeah, let's go. So do you wanna tackle question 5?
Yeah. Okay. In presenting the argument in the passage, the author uses all of the following except. Now again, we need to
yes,
cross-verify each option.
Exactly. But what do you notice about it? Like, as in, we're checking a list of things, But what is that
Yes.
list? What would you label it?
The facts, maybe.
Yeah, could be. Yep. I mean, I was going to say, like, in presenting the argument is a little bit broader than specifically facts they list. If I think the wording for that might be more along the lines of, and I could be wrong when I say this, by the way, I haven't looked at the answer choices, but I think if they said the argument is reliant upon all of the following except, then that's kind of like our facts, our evidence, our premises. In presenting the argument in the passage, that's like taking it a level above. Now it's saying, like, how did they present the argument? Like, what kind of argument did they make? Like, in presenting the argument, the author uses what kinds of tools? So
Okay.
the author uses what? Like, uses what tools to make their argument? Do you see the subtle difference there?
Yeah, got it.
It's not a big thing because once you look at the choices, obviously that starts
Yeah.
to become clearer. And the point is, this is an accept question, so we are checking them. But it helps. It might help, I think, find those answers
Yes.
faster.
Okay.
So yeah. So go on.
Yeah. So option A says statistical information about global commerce. So statistical. So the first thing that pops up my mind is when I see statistical information. Yeah, 7%, 75%.
Yep.
It is the author is giving some sort of statistical information about global commerce.
Yes.
So that is true.
Tick. Or in my case,
Okay.
in my case, cross actually, because in this question that means it is there. It's not an accept.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The next thing is definition of terms concerning world trade. Yes, free trade and fair trade. So the author has explained about free trade and fair trade. So that is a cross.
Perfect.
Next, generalizations about Arboria's economic system. Generalizations, yes. I mean, in the past, when we talk about second paragraph, it said about various things that Arboria has actually. So I think, yeah. I mean, at least to me, I feel like he made generalizations.
Yeah. I feel like that too.
Yeah. So, but
maybe
we can hold on to see. Maybe
yeah.
just in case.
So in
maybe
my terms of the squiggle.
Okay. Then we'll go on to D. Historical background of Arborian trade policy. Yes, because he talked about 1940s.
Perfect.
That we can strike off.
Perfect.
E. An example of an economic system whose principles differ from those of Arboria. So did he take an example? Maybe we need to go to the last paragraph for what? Coaching multilateral.
An example I'm thinking would mean specifically talking about some other country or
Yes.
or a hypothetical country even.
Yeah.
Oh no, for it to be an example, it's probably not hypothetical. It's probably an actual tangible country that has a tangible economic system. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't think we know anywhere about an example that's different. I mean, the only other one I think was mentioned was Warfland, and even though this was in a different question, we know in some detail that we don't know that about Warfland. So
no, the last paragraph, the last two sentences.
Okay.
From forging a multilateral trade policy consensus among so many diverse economic systems has become virtually impossible, and while multilateral talks going on, Arboria misses opportunities for trade expansion.
So they definitely mentioned other systems, many diverse ones even. Do you think that's an example of a system?
I'm not sure, but now maybe if we can reject C on a solid base, then we can have this E.
Okay. So you want a squiggly line E now?
Yeah, ABD are out. Now we are with C and D. I mean, C, we got like, generalizations. That also, like around 75% we can reject it, but if we can take it to 100%, the C thing, the option C,
Right.
then we will be sure that E, there is no example.
Right. Right.
Right. So,
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's definitely one way to do it. So yeah, I think for this is very specific, but you could go either way. You could be
okay.
like, you think there are generalizations, we could go and find one, like, oh, that's a generalization. In that case, cross, like, C is out. We could go find a generalization and rule out C that way.
Yeah.
We kind of already feel like there are generalizations.
Yes, that is true.
So, I don't know.
We
Maybe
are
finding a
throwing.
generalization is faster. That's probably the better way to go. What I was going to say is, like, if we've gone through the passage at this point, maybe we haven't, but
Okay.
an example would probably jump out. And the fact that it hasn't, like, we haven't got any other countries except Wharfland, and specifically we don't know anything about Wharfland or what their policy is. Like, we never see another example of anyone's policy. So because of that, I feel like E is a pretty good answer. That it's not there. But I agree with you, actually. I think what you said is right. Better to just find a generalization and say, oh, look, this sentence has a generalization. C is out. Like, it's better to do that. I agree with you. So let's do that.
Yeah.
Would that be a generalization, you think?
Yeah. This is where the hard part comes, actually, to actually find out a generalization.
Yeah. I mean, what this is saying in the line that I've highlighted is they will probably, or they have a good chance of continuing loss economically unless the leaders can start recognizing differences between different systems, or whatever it is. Like, whatever I said doesn't even have to be accurate. Basically, what I said
Yes.
is something here about their economy could be affected by something in their economy, or someone doing something in their economy. That's pretty general. Like, to say that an entire economic loss is, you face the prospect of it if this thing doesn't change, that's pretty general, right? Like, there are a lot of things that make an economy do what it does.
Yes.
So I think we could find a generalization right there and say, does it make generalizations about an economic system? Yeah, I think it does.
Yes. Yes.
And here's another one. Trade policy seems paralyzed by the relentless conflict. Is that a generalization about their economic system? Well, it's a generalization about their trade policy. Is the trade policy the same thing as economic system? Maybe not. This is probably closer. But anyway, I think you get the idea. I agree with you.
Yeah.
It was better to come find this than it would be to look
No,
for the one
can
that's
we
not there.
also say, see, I just got it out. See,
Mhm.
both are correct. I mean, the assumptions are wrong. These are also generalizations, right?
Fair trade
Can
requires.
we say that?
Okay, we have to be careful though. Generalizations, yes,
No.
about
What
Arboria's
exactly
economic
is
system. Is that a generalization
the
about Arboria's economic system?
generalization is something, uh, saying it outright, or maybe bringing all factors
Right,
together.
right. So I think the line you just pointed out, both are correct. Fair trade requires this, and equal access requires something else, or leads to whatever. Like that line you pointed out, yes, that's a
Yeah.
generalization. Is that a generalization about Arboria's economic system?
No. No.
No, this is a generalization in general.
Yes, that is true.
So, did the author use, like, for that to be the example? I just mean, like, there are other examples, obviously. Like the one in the first paragraph, I think, is a good one. But Yeah, to say that fair trade requires something and equal access leads to something else, that could apply to anyone. Both sides base their positions on same two outdated premises. Okay, well, that's a general statement, but is it about their economic system? Well, no, not specifically.
No.
It's about the opinions
Yes.
of these groups.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah. I mean, I think, though, that, like, world trade is no longer dominated by blah, blah, blah. Well, you could also say that's probably a generalization, too, about their economy. Misses opportunities for trade expansion. That's a generalization about their economic system, I guess.
Yes.
So yeah, there's a few there. And it does say generalizations, so there should be multiple.
Oh, that is true.
So yeah. Another one, Arborian trade policy has not. It's a generalization
Okay.
to say that their trade policy has not advanced or shifted
Yes.
radically. Things like that.
Okay.
Anyway, I think that was a good question, though.
Yeah. What is the answer? E should be our answer.
E was... Oh yeah, E's not in there. Right, yeah, E should be the answer. Yep, E is the answer. Alright, we've got 3 questions. Two more questions, I think. No, 3 more questions. Damn. All right, let's do this quickly. We'll finish the passage together, but yeah, let's do it a bit quicker.
Okay.
Actually, like the less that I need to say anything, because, yeah, like hopefully I can say a lot less for the rest of these.
Okay. Shall I go with the question?
Yeah, please.
Okay. The author asserts which of the following about Arboria's trade policy? Okay. Asserts which of the following about Arboria's trade policy? I mean, is this some kind of fact checking or inference kind of thing when the author asserts?
The author asserts which of the following about this is saying the author says which of these is true, specifically about Arboria's trade policy.
Okay.
I don't think I answered your question. What was your question specifically?
No, my question is when the word appears like asserts, what should we need to look for?
So you want to look for whatever it asked us about. So what did it ask us about?
Okay.
No, just the question. Don't look at the answers. What did the question ask us about?
Yeah, it is asking about what the author is saying, right? I mean,
No.
What fact?
Like, well, there's that, but what's the rest of the question?
It's about Arboria's trade policy, right?
Right.
What is the author saying? Arboria's trade policy.
Right. Which is probably one of the more broader things it could have said. That doesn't narrow it down very much. A lot of this passage is about the trade policy, but I still would approach it the same way.
Okay. Yeah. Should we maybe go with another question which is kind of different, because this is again, we need to check with the paragraph and all.
Okay, well, we can skip. Well, I mean, let's tell you what. Why don't I do this one quickly, just myself?
Okay.
Hopefully, I get it right. I'll do this one quickly to just to speak out loud, because you're right. We've done a few now specific questions looking at it, and then the next question is general, so that'll be good. The author asserts which of the following about Arboria's trade policy? Okay, well, most of the passage is about trade policy, unfortunately. Also, I don't have a summary, so I don't know exactly where I should be looking. But it could be almost anything. So I might be actually scanning generally for like the main points around the trade policy here. What do I already know? Well, I would have known from the first line that they're floundering in the global market. I probably read maybe even the whole paragraph. And so their big trade issue is not free versus protectionist. It's diminishing trade versus expanding trade. Okay. So anything there could be one of the answers. At this point, I might already start looking. I might already start checking the answers for one of those facts. But again, like, I'm probably going from the stuff in my summary. So here's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to very quickly run through what would have been in my summary. All of that I just said, floundering in the market, losing position profit, etc. And the problem is with their trade policy. So their problem is with the trade policy. The author asserts which of the following. If one of those answers is there's a problem with their trade policy, looks good. But it's not free versus that, it's this. Okay, so all of those things are in my, those 3 or 4 facts are in my summary. And the conclusion, I would have had noted as a conclusion, the issue is not free versus protectionism, it's diminishing versus expanding. Okay. Arboria is operating with an obsolete trade policy, an artifact of the mid-1940s, when Arboria and Wolfland dominated the global economy. Tariffs were the principal obstacle to trade. Arborian supremacy were uncontested in virtually all industries. Okay. Because there's literally like, this is barely a sentence left. I would have read this as well. In the intervening decades, economic circumstances have shifted radically. Arborian trade policy has not. Okay. Point of this is, Arboria is operating on old policy from the 1940s that they haven't changed. That's my understanding of that paragraph. The specifics I don't really need to remember or know. I'll come back to them if I have a question about it, which we did. Today, Arboria's trade policy seems paralyzed by the relentless conflict between proponents of free and fair trade. Okay, so I know that the cause for this paralysis, like the reason that their trade policy hasn't shifted is probably because they've been paralyzed by this conflict. Do I need to know what they are? No, not for my summary. Okay, free traders say something, fair traders say something. Cool. I know that if I need the definitions later, this is where I can look for it, and we would have for that other question. Both are correct. I'm looking like all I'm doing is I'm not actually reading this. I'm scanning for keywords. And so going back to this, I would have made a note about the first sentence to say that the stuff about the issue being like the conflict. Free trade is something, fair trade is something. Literally, that's all I would have sort of noted or like noticed myself. And then I see both are correct. That sounds like an opinion. So I might even make a note that there's a small conclusion here. Maybe not the main conclusion, but the author makes an opinion here. So I'd probably write both correct in some way, highlighting that the author said that, maybe in quote marks or something. And then, whatever they said about it doesn't, right? But seeing that, I can kind of actually glance ahead and already see they base their positions on outdated premises. So I might have even written that down as the sort of secondary premise. I might have even written this down. The author is basically, sorry, not secondary premise, secondary conclusion. The author is essentially concluding that these people have it all wrong because it's outdated. So I might have made note of the outdated premises thing. I wouldn't have read what these were. I don't care what they are, just that they're outdated. Both assumptions are wrong. If I didn't catch it here, because I might have just seen both correct and sort of skipped past that. If I didn't see it here, I'm definitely seeing this. So both of these are wrong, and I know that now. Author says that, definitely. That's an author opinion for sure. And then we have some stats. Don't care what they are. But some stats about global commerce, I guess, is maybe what I'd write. And then we have a confirmation of the conclusion right at the end. They're missing these opportunities for expansion. So that's a confirmation of the conclusion. It kind of clarifies what the conclusion was. What I just said out loud is what would have been in my summary. So, based on that, the author asserts which of the following about Arboria's trade policy, and I'm already breaking my rule of writing it down so I don't have to remember it, but anyway. Dramatic revision of Arboria's trade policy will be necessary unless Arborian manufacturers improve the quality of their goods. Nothing about quality of goods in any of the main points that I saw, so it's not going to be A. Most crucial issue facing Arborian trade policymakers is that of free trade versus protectionism. The opposite of that, I know for a fact that it's not free trade versus protectionism. It's the other thing, which I don't really remember. I think it was expansion versus reduction or whatever the word was. Diminishing. There you go.
Yes.
So it's definitely not B. My summary tells me it's not B as well. So A and B are out just on my summary. Haven't had to read anything yet. Like, I haven't had to read the passage again yet, is what I should say. C. Arboria's current trade policy was essentially developed during the 40s and has changed little since that time. Well, I actually know that that's true. I know that's a true fact from paragraph 2. And I happened to read all of paragraph 2 when making my summary. This looks really good. I'm underlining C. Because it was... Well, actually, I don't know that it was developed in the 40s. Just that they had it in the 40s. I might have to double check the wording on that. So maybe I'll keep this as an underline. It's very good. It's not a squiggly line. It's an underline. But I'm not 100% yet until I double check that. D. Arboria's trade policy is widely emulated throughout the world to the extent that most international commerce is modeled on Arboria's principles. Widely emulated throughout the world. I didn't see anything about anyone else copying them, so I don't like D. D's out. Arboria's trade policy has evolved gradually over the last 80 years. No, I already know that's definitely false because it didn't change at all. So let's go back to this just to really doubly confirm it. I like C. I think it's the answer. Essentially developed during the 40s. An artifact of the 40s. Well, that means it came from the 40s. It was made in the 40s. All right, C is definitely the answer. And hopefully that's right. Yes. So most of that time was me describing what I would have done in my summary. So remember, that would have happened at the start before I saw any question. So the actual answering this question was really quite quick, I think. Because all of these were actually eliminatable based on the fact that they weren't in my summary. And one of them was. Yeah. The only way I'd have to go through the whole passage or like read a lot more of it is if I got to E and I had nothing but squiggly lines or something. Like if I didn't have any answer that was an underline, that's when I'd go back to the passage. And even then, actually, I had an underline, but I still wanted to be 100% sure it developed in the 40s. It was made then. I still wanted to be 100% sure because I wanted to be careful about my words. So even then I confirmed it. Does that kind of work as a good example of what we were talking about?
Yes, totally.
And like I said, I think the question itself was very quick. It was the summary stuff that was the part that would have happened at the start.
Yeah.
All right. Now, based on what I've told you, tell me what you would do. And I know you don't have anything written, so what would you do?
I would outrightly read all the options.
So you would have just read this straight through, read all the options, and see if any of them look good.
Yes, I would outrightly read all the options and I would see whether because since we have already solved 3 questions on this, so I might be able to say what author is trying to say.
Yeah.
So I might pick a best choice, and then maybe what you should have done. What you usually do is pick the right answer and see what the right option is saying, right? So I would see like what's the nearest option is and then maybe correlate with the passage.
Right, like what sounds the best and then check it's right.
Yes.
Okay. I don't think there's anything completely wrong with that. Nothing to my mind makes that sound like it would have major problems. I think maybe a possible problem, if I have to, like, I mean, I don't have to, but if I'm as I think about it, a possible problem is if you find something that sounds good, like, why does it sound good? Might be a question. Like, does it sound good because you know something about free trade policies? Like you read an article one time and you know something, and that's why it sounds good, right? Like, oh, that's actually true. Yeah. That's a fact, right? Like I know that's true. Well, it doesn't matter if you know it's true if it's not in the passage. So that's maybe partially why, like maybe a possible problem. I'm not saying it is a problem, but a possible problem maybe is you might bring in more outside information because you know things or whatever, or because it's common sense. Maybe something seems like common sense, but it doesn't have to be common sense for it to be in the passage.
Yeah.
So
I totally agree with that.
Yeah. So that's my only thought there. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you're going and confirming, that's probably still fine. because most of the time you probably are on the right track and you'll confirm it. But the risk is, if you do what I did on the other question, if you love the answer already, you want it to be the correct answer, you find a way to make it correct, like instead of letting the
Yes.
passage tell you it is. So yeah.
Yeah.
And I did that on that last question, like a couple of questions ago. So, anyone can make that mistake for sure. I say that like, I don't make any mistakes. I don't make very many. That's why I say that like that. Anyway, on RC, I should say.
Okay.
Sorry, that probably all sounds stupid, but I hope you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Or
Got it.
how I intended anyway. So yeah, tell you what, why don't you, because you don't have a summary, like what I would do is I would say the passage is primarily concerned with, and like look at my summary, and my summary would have told me something along the lines of Arboria's economy, trade policy is stagnant or something, and due to conflict, right? Due to conflict between free and fair trade. Because this would have been in my summary because of the fact that it was the first line of that paragraph. So what is this passage about? It's about Arboria's trade policy and how it's stuck in the past, the 40s, because these two groups don't agree. That's what I think it's about.
Yes.
And I know that from my summary before I look at any questions. Now, with that in mind, you haven't got the summary, you haven't written one, but let's pretend that you have not answered other questions, because I know you also said you've already answered 3 questions, so maybe you know something now. Let's pretend this is the first question.
Okay.
Like, now just do exactly what you want to do. Like,
okay.
Not necessarily what I've said, not necessarily what you said, just what do you want to do right now?
Okay, fine. So I'll read the options. Illustrating the erosion of Arboria's position in the world marketplace.
Yep.
Examine the differences between free and fair traders.
Okay.
So can I bring my first question, because I've read the first 3 paragraphs. So I know that this free and fair traders is only in the 3rd paragraph. So that is very narrow.
Right.
So I'm eliminating B. See, advocating a reassessment of Arboria's trade policy. So the fact that I did not read the 4th paragraph, so maybe in the 4th paragraph the author might reassess. I'm not sure. So I'll hold on to C.
Okay.
D. Criticizing the terms of GATT. So GATT is just one thing that has been mentioned in the 3rd paragraph. So it is again narrowing down. So I don't like D. D is out.
Okay.
Next, E. Comparing the different economic circumstances of Arboria's trade partners. Okay. The 2nd paragraph says it's in the past, the thing is about past, and the 4th paragraph says something about now. So maybe I can hold on to E also. So now I'm with A, C, and E. So the passage in general as a whole. Now when I look at A, illustrating the erosion of Arboria's position in the world marketplace. So it is also saying something other than that. The passage is also saying something other than that, because the 4th paragraph is actually discussing something other else. At least this is what I'm feeling. So I will reject A.
Okay.
Now, between C and E, advocating a reassessment. Is the author or is the passage reassessing? No, it's not reassessing. So that will leave with E. So this is how I would do. Maybe yes.
Okay. So when you first looked at C, again, I haven't got an idea in my mind of which one's right yet. I haven't picked one. But when you first mentioned C, you said, I don't want to get rid of it because maybe something in the 4th paragraph talks about reassessment or something. I don't think you checked that when you came back to C. You came back to it and said, no, it's not reassessing, so it's out.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that that's the right way or wrong way. I just want to know, like, what happened where the first time you read it, you wanted to keep it, and what changed the second time you read it for C.
Okay.
Uh,
So the
yeah.
first, yeah. The first time I couldn't reject it outright, and I thought maybe I should come back to this.
Mm-hmm. But why?
Okay.
What made you able to reject it when you came back? I guess that's the question.
So I mean, I looked after the word reassessment. Then I thought uh, whether the author or whether the passage is actually reassessing the trade policy.
Okay, so that makes sense. I get what happened now. Um, so with that, this is not saying that the author reassesses it. This is saying that the author is advocating that it should be reassessed.
Okay.
So I'm not saying this is the answer, by the way. I'm not saying C is correct. I'm just saying I wanted to pick up on, like, when we're eliminating, we know why we're eliminating.
Yeah.
That's kind of the key point I wanted to pick up on. Like when
Okay.
you had very clear reasons to eliminate B and D. You had a very clear
Okay.
reason. Like the passage as a whole can't be concerned with GAT because it only gets mentioned like one time right down here. So you had a very good reason to rule out D, and you had the more or less the same reason. Free and fair traders. How could it be the main idea of this passage if the first time we even hear about it is in paragraph 3? Also, very good idea. Like very good reason to rule out B. So C, you were like, I don't have a good reason to rule this out yet, so I'll keep it. Fair enough. You came back and you were like, I have a good reason now. It's done, but I didn't know what it was. And yeah, so I think it came down to like then it came back to like, well, let's be careful with the wording. Did the author reassess the policy? Well, I mean, in a way, maybe this whole thing is a reassessment. I don't know, but that's not the point anyway. The point is, did they say that it needs to be reassessed? That's what C is saying. And can we
Okay.
rule that out? Like maybe we can, maybe we can't. I'm not sure. um, but is that the whole point? Here's the thing with main idea or primarily concerned with questions, like whatever it is. Very often you will be able to get it from the first paragraph because
Okay.
it's very unlikely that the main idea of this whole thing doesn't show up in the first paragraph. Like I can't really think of a good example where it would happen, because the first paragraph, it's like a topic sentence for a paragraph, right? This sentence
Mm.
tells us what's in the paragraph. I mean, this paragraph is more often than not going to be telling us what's in the rest of the passage. So if this paragraph, if our summary of the first paragraph says, ooh, Arboria's struggling, and the problem is their policy, their trade policy, they're probably going to keep struggling unless they make this change. And today the big issue is not this thing, but it's some other thing. Okay. From that, the main idea to me seems like their economy is struggling, their trade policy is Y, and I mean that's kind of it, right? And then the rest of my summary would have been the first lines of these, right? And I would have seen also the reason it's been paralyzed is because of these free and fair traders. So that might be part of my thinking as well. But is the main idea that it's the free and fair traders' fault? Not really. This is just the reason, like you said, right?
Yeah.
The main idea is Arboria is struggling, and we want to know why. Like, let's discuss why. Like, here's a reason I think it is. Here's the reason I think it's struggling. Like, and all of this is now discussing that reason for why it's struggling. And then we get to the end, and like, if you want like a nice book ending of it, the last line, while these talks carry on, as in while there's still conflict, they keep missing opportunities for trade expansion. Like, it's all from start to finish about why are they struggling? And what, like, and as long as this problem continues, like, what's the problem? So I would say there's going to be an answer that says, like, Arboria has a problem in its foreign trade or in its trade policy. That's going to be the thing. Advocating a reassessment of Arboria's trade policy, I'd probably keep this underlined, like the squiggly line, personally, because I
Yes.
didn't necessarily see, oh, they need to reassess it, but they kind of did, maybe. I mean, they're kind of saying it not directly. They're not saying you need to go do this, except for one line. I'm remembering they said a line about the lawmakers or political leaders. Here it is. Arboria faces the prospect of continuing economic loss until business and political leaders recognize these differences. I mean, is that in a way saying that these business and political leaders need to recognize some difference in policy to make a change in policy? Maybe. I'm keeping that as a squiggly line for that reason. Illustrating the erosion of Arboria's position in the world marketplace. Is this whole thing about showing how they eroded in the marketplace? I mean, it is floundering. It's declining. This line said it was dominating and now it's coming down. That was kind of an important line. Why is it doing that? Is the whole idea about the position? I don't think that the whole idea is about the position, but also it could be. That's another squiggly line. So I'm with you on that too.
Yeah.
Comparing
and actually E can be eliminated. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was going to say. So awesome.
Yeah, E can be eliminated because Arboria's, it was talking about trade partners.
Yeah, we didn't really compare partners at all. I don't think at all. So
partner. Yeah, exactly.
So E was out. So it really does come down to between A versus C. And this is like it's an example of like, okay, this is a bit hard. Like, I want to kind of almost make an assumption and say, is it because they're advocating a reassessment? Well, like, are they advocating a reassessment? Political leaders need to recognize this thing is kind of something they said, but they didn't use those words. Like, they didn't say they need to face or like whatever. That they need to recognize this thing. They're basically saying these problems will continue until it's recognized. Is that a roundabout way of advocating? Maybe. And illustrating the erosion of their position in the world. Well, now we're sort of getting towards like sort of the erosion in the world is kind of what's talked about in this last paragraph. But I don't know. The first paragraph, like I said, is like the main clue, and it's less focused about its position. It's less focused about Arboria being the leader, and more focused on the fact that it's failing, it's declining. Like there's problems, and and the problems probably should be fixed. Like that's what this first paragraph is more about. Not about if they were number 1 and now they're 50. Like it's not that. That only comes in really down here. And they mentioned in paragraph 2 as well, obviously, that they dominated. So for me, I'm leaning towards advocating a reassessment of trade policy because I think both of these things are true that they happen, but I don't think the whole point of this passage was to show the decline of Arboria. The point of this passage is to highlight the problem, probably with the intent of showing someone who can fix it, how to fix it, sort of thing, or what they need to think about. So I'm gonna say it's C for that reason. But this is one I'm not 100% confident on because maybe I've made an assumption without realizing. Let's see. C. Whew. Relief.
Yeah.
Relief.
Nice.
But that's hard, right? Like deciding between A and C here is really hard.
Yes.
And the main thing that took me to C was the fact that if this whole passage is about something, you better believe it's talked about in paragraph 1. It's almost always going to be the main thing in paragraph 1. And so for the first time for their dominance to be mentioned here in paragraph 2 tells me that's just part of the explanation. It's not the main point. Like how far they've fallen is part of the explanation. It's not the main point. The main point is the fact that they have these problems. And how far they've fallen just shows how big the problem is.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Like, I'm really glad that that worked out. If I got that one wrong, it would have been a bit sad. Because I would have been sitting here going, now what? But yeah. So you, just to clarify though, like to come back to make sure we capture the learnings here. You had
Yeah.
picked, which one did you pick again? Remind me. You ruled.
I picked E.
You picked E. Okay.
I picked E because
But
I failed to notice these partners at the end.
yeah, yeah.
I picked E.
So,
But
but you caught Y, so you ruled it out. That's fine. We don't need to go over that again. The other thing that I noticed in my notes here, or that I made a note of it when you said it out loud, when you were first solving, was when you looked at A, you ruled it out because the fourth paragraph. So illustrating the erosion of Arboria's position in the world marketplace, and you said it didn't come up until the fourth paragraph. I actually think you pretty much did what I did, like as in I made it sound really hard to choose between A and C, and you made it really easy to choose between A and C because you picked up on exactly that point.
yeah,
That like, oh, they mainly talk about the position in fourth paragraph. I mean, I guess I also wrote this down because it's also here in the second paragraph. Like they were dominant here
yeah,
and they declined, so it starts
yeah,
talking about it there. But at the end of the day, your logic that you use to say it shouldn't be A because it's already like, if this was the main idea, we wouldn't hear about it for the first time down there. That was good logic, so I wanted to point that out. That was like a good elimination.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, okay.
So,
And let's do this last one and then wrap up because this has been a
yeah.
4 hour session and I wanted this to be a short one. So all right.
Okay.
It's all good though. I haven't practiced RC in my own time, so this is actually good for me because it's making sure I am keeping it sharp without, you know what I mean? So this is still good.
Yeah. Okay.
Hola, Esmeraldas.
Okay.
Hi. Sorry, we're just doing a GMAT session right now. Oh, and Corpus, hey, welcome. I'm not sure what time you joined, but maybe the RC stuff is not your favorite stuff, but hopefully it's still useful. Some of the stuff we've been talking about. Anyway, last question. I'll let you get to it.
Okay. Should we go?
Yeah, you go.
Okay. The other implies that the main obstacle to a truly effective Arborian trade policy is the. So
Sorry, finish
the
this
other
sentence.
implies
Yeah.
the main. So he's asking about the main obstacle that in order the Arborian trade policy can be effective, right?
Yeah.
So,
okay. So
one,
what are you doing?
weak position that
All right, I'm gonna stop you.
Arboria
I'm gonna stop
currently.
you. I'm gonna stop you. Don't look at the answers. Find the answer first. Like
You're talking with me, or
I'm telling you. Like as in, I'm asking you to do that. I'm not telling you. I order you. No. I'm asking you to do that.
okay.
Just for the sake of practicing this, like to see
Okay, you
see if
want me
it
to
worked.
go over the paragraph? Over the
Yes.
passage, right?
Find the answer in the passage first before you look at the answer choices. Like again, that
Okay.
might not be what you end up doing. Like this might not be the way for you to do it, but see how it feels to do it. That's what I want you to do right now.
Okay.
So the author implies, what exactly are you looking for when you go to the passage right now? Like read the rest of that question without looking at the answers and tell me exactly what you want to look for.
Okay, just a second.
Read it out loud.
Yeah. Okay, the other implies that the main obstacle to a truly effective. So, based on my knowledge, I think.
I mean, don't tell
It's
me
not
what the
on my
answer is.
knowledge.
Don't tell me the answer. Don't tell me, oh, the reason is this problem is the thing. Like, no. What are you looking for? Like, when you go to the passage, what question do you have to have the answer for when you come back?
I mean, what is exactly stopping Arboria to be Arborian trade policy?
Okay. Can you be
Okay.
a little bit more specific?
More specific. Okay.
Like
Uh,
the thing about doing, like, so sorry to be like a pain, but
okay.
the reason I'm really kind of hammering this is this is the part that stops this from taking 20 minutes. Um, Knowing what you're looking for is the part that makes this doable without reading the whole passage. Um, so if you read the whole passage, then you kind of know what's there, right? Like if you understood it. If you didn't understand it,
Yes.
maybe that's a problem, and sometimes that happens, right? Um, I think one thing that helps me when doing these kinds of passages, if I don't understand the passage, sometimes I don't have to understand it if I know how to find the answer. And I think that was partially, again, I don't want to speak for Ohm, um, but he might be able to like sort of talk about it at some point. When he was talking about like what was showing him that maybe he should try what I do is when I was looking at some answers and going, I actually have no idea what this is talking about. But I don't need to because I found the answer was supposed to be this, and I don't have to know what it means to know that it's not the answer. um,
Okay.
I actually had some questions like that because we were looking at like a science, like the passage that really comes to mind. And I think it was the one in that YouTube, the one that I made, like that I ended up clipping for YouTube. There was a passage about pain signals, and they talked about P signals and they talked
Yeah.
about like blockers and this and that, neurotransmitters, whatever. Like they talked about all these really
Yes.
technical
Yes.
things.
Complex terminology.
Yeah, I still did. I didn't understand it at the time. I still don't understand it now, but I didn't need to be able to find the answer. And so that's why
Okay.
I'm really hammering this of like, what exactly do you need to go look for? Because if you don't know exactly what that is, you'll read the whole passage to answer this question. Um,
Okay.
and it shouldn't be Arborian trade policy. I'm looking for Arborian trade policy. If you say you're looking for Arborian trade policy, that's the whole passage.
No, I'm looking based on this question. I have to look for a reason.
A reason
That
for,
is a reason that is stopping Aborian trade policy to be effective from.
right. So you don't even have to change, like, you don't even have to play with the wording too much, right? Main obstacle to an effective Arborian trade policy. What is
Yeah.
stopping the policy from being good?
Yes, exactly.
Um, so when you go to the passage, you're looking for policy is bad because, policy is halted because, policy has issue because, like, you're looking for something in the passage very specifically saying Arboria's trade policy might have been fine, except this is why it's not. Now,
Yeah.
if you're very specifically looking for that, you don't have to spend time reading things describing free trade, fair trade, the 40s. Like, you don't have to read all that stuff because none of those things are literally saying this is the problem. You want to read something that says this is the problem. As soon as you find that, you stop and you pick that answer because it's going to be one of them.
Okay.
See what I mean?
Yeah, I got it.
And so, again, most important step to be able to do that effectively, be very clear what you're looking for because otherwise you'll read the whole thing.
Yes.
All right. So now that I've said all that, hopefully that's my last spiel for the whole day. And I'll let you just tackle it. So reading out loud, tell me what you're looking, where you're looking and what you're looking for.
So yeah, the one particular reason that is stopping Arboria's trade policy to be the best thing or to be effective is what I'm going to looking for.
Perfect.
And I think it should be in the first paragraph mostly because
Mm-hmm.
that is where after that the author is explaining various things about why the trade policy has been not so effective.
Right. Could be, yeah.
Yeah, so it says the problem is not Aboria's products, but Aboria's trade policy. And Aboria faces the prospect of continuing economic losses. I think this is the reason. faces the prospect of continuing economic loss until Aborian business and political leaders recognize the fundamental differences between Aborian and foreign economic systems. I think this is what is stopping the trade policy to be effective from.
I like your logic. So
Okay,
what do
today.
you do now?
Yeah. So now I'll go back to the options. Weak position that Aboria currently holds in global marketplace. Uh, is it an obstacle? But we are looking more of a reason type of thing why the trade policy is not being effective. It is not just the weak position kind of thing. So A is striked off.
Right.
Inability
So
of
sorry, just to
Korean
clarify,
leaders to become.
I zoned out for
Yeah.
just a second, but you ruled out A because their weak position is not the reason that their policy is bad. That's what you said,
More
right?
of looking for a reason why it is not effective.
Right, right. So you're saying that their weak position is not the reason.
I feel that weak position is not the reason because it said, it is facing the Aboria is facing some sort of losses because of the political leaders.
Mm-hmm.
No, until their business and political leaders recognized something
Right.
else.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I'm kind of.
Cool. I agree with you. I just wanted to clarify. Sorry, that was my fault. I missed it.
Okay.
Sorry.
Next,
So go on.
option B, inability of Aborian leaders to recognize that foreign economic systems are based on principles fundamentally different from their own. Okay, now the reason is blaming the leaders that they were unable to recognize the changes.
Mm-hmm.
Let me go on. Okay, yes, I think so. Yeah, I think so. This is in line with the sentence that we have read. It
Mm-hmm.
faces the prospect of continuing economic losses until the political leaders recognized the fundamental differences
Yep.
uh, between Aboriginal and foreign. Okay, this is very much in line.
Mm-hmm. So what do you do?
Yeah, different from their own. Okay, C. So I'll keep B.
Okay.
Uh,
Underline, yeah.
the dominance of the supporters of free trade in the conflict between free trade. No, this is too narrow. No,
Okay.
I don't want to say this too narrow, but is this a reason dominance of supporters of free trade in the conflict between free trade and fair trade? Are we talking about conflict? Uh, no, I don't think the passage nowhere mentioned about the conflict between free trade and it said about differences. It also said the author also said both are correct,
Mm.
though there are differences, but uh, it was nowhere directly related to the main reason that it has to be effective. So
Yeah. I mean,
I'm striking.
for this to be, I agree with you. For this to be the main roadblock or obstacle or the main reason why the policy is failing, that basically says it's because free trade are in charge or something.
Yeah,
I don't even think we know that in the passage at all, let alone from what we read. So
yeah,
yeah. So you're
okay,
giving that a straight X, is that right?
yeah.
And by the way,
So
you don't have to use my marking, but that's just what I've used. So for the sake of keeping it consistent on stream, I'm going to use the same stuff.
okay, yeah. So D it says apparent inability of Aboriginal industries to produce goods that are competitive in the world market. I feel this is irrelevant and out of the passage.
Okay.
Next, protectionism that characterizes the foreign trade policies of so many of Arboria's trade partners. Mm, this is also kind of off the passage, or maybe doesn't relate properly to the cause, or that it doesn't give a reason of why Arborian trade policy has been not so effective.
Well, I
So
think it could if If this were
But I'm not
true.
strong. I mean, my reason is not so strong on E actually.
That's why I wanted to highlight it. This could actually be true. Like if this were true, sorry. Like let me start that sentence again. If this
Yeah.
were true, this could be a reason. This could be a big obstacle. Because what
Yes.
it's talking about is like if all of their trade partners, all this country's neighbors, they all close their borders for trade, then that could be a really big obstacle for Arboria to be able to have good trade if everybody closed their doors to them. Because protectionism would mean that they all protect themselves and close themselves to Arboria. So if this were true, this would be a really big roadblock, potentially the biggest one.
Yes.
But there's a big if there. And I think you know where I'm going with this.
Yes. Yes.
What's the big if?
The big. I mean, this could be a potential answer. Or that's what you're saying.
No. As in like the reason we're ruling it out. Just being very specific about why. Because you said yourself you didn't feel like you had a good reason for ruling this one out.
Yes.
So if you look at my highlighting, this is the reason.
Sorry. Okay, just a second.
No, you're good. I'm pointing at the end of the first paragraph.
Okay. Today yeah.
So the point I'm making here is I think everything you did on that question was spot on. Exactly what I would have wanted to do and what I would have done, I think. And you got to E and you were like, this is a good reason. I don't have a good reason to rule this out. Also, good instinct. What does that mean? Well, maybe it means I keep it. E is a good reason.
Yes.
E is a good reason to rule it out. It's not the one I was looking for. It's not the one that I found before, right? We already found the leader's recognition is the issue. We already found that. But here's the thing. That doesn't mean it is definitely the answer. Like what that means is it's a very good answer. We have another answer that also looks good, and I don't know that I can rule it out. Now let's go back and be very careful with our words to make sure that every word is correct. That's the thing, right? But in this case, we don't actually have to do that. In this case, when we look at this, we see, okay, let's double check E. E could be good, actually. It's not what I was looking for, but it could be good. So even if it's a squiggly line, because what we were looking for is what we expected to be the right answer. So maybe we give it a squiggly line, but I'm not confident yet. I don't want to pick B yet. Well, once we see this, we go, oh, okay, the author actually says it's definitely not because of the protectionism. So I can rule out E very comfortably. And with that in mind, now B is easy to choose. But if this was an answer, let's say this line doesn't exist. Let's pretend that this passage is exactly the same, except that last line about it's not free trade versus protectionism, that line doesn't exist. So ignore the birdies. So if that line doesn't exist, and the rest of the passage is exactly the same, now we're still looking at B as a good answer.
Yes.
And now we're looking at E going, protectionism that characterizes the foreign trade policies of so many of our various trade partners. Now it's like, woof, that could be it. I mean, you could read the whole passage and look for the word protectionism or something and maybe figure it out. Like you could probably do that. And maybe on a high stress day, I might actually do that myself. But I think much better to go back and be very careful about the words on B. And if the words on B are like, if they are spot on, then I think something that might be the answer, even though I didn't see anything that to like make me think it would be, it shouldn't be enough to take me away from the answer that does that. Which I know I'm saying that, and that sounds like I'm going against the idea of 4 wrong answers. I probably am a little bit, I suppose you could say, but I guess the point is, if you've done your summary and you've read the first paragraph, you've seen these main points here. This is front and center, right in the middle of the first paragraph.
Yeah.
You know the main idea of each paragraph after that because you've seen these lines. So you know that this policy, like this paragraph, is about how it's fallen since the 40s. This policy is about why. It's because of this conflict. Paragraph, sorry. I keep saying policy. This paragraph is about, like, essentially, well, this paragraph, the fourth paragraph, doesn't really say anything new. The fourth paragraph just confirms a bunch of stuff from before.
Yes.
So if you know that from your summary, then the idea that protectionism is the biggest reason foreign trade policies, like, I think you can confidently say, if it's not in this first paragraph and this is in the first paragraph, you can go with B. That is not even considering, like, looking at the specific language, because what they're saying here is Arboria faces the prospect of continuing loss until they do this. In other words, they will keep facing this problem until they do this. Like,
Yeah.
that's pretty clearly saying this is the thing that is stopping it from happening.
Yes.
So you nailed that from the start. And so I think what you could say is you might not be the most confident ruling out E because you don't
Yes.
know for sure it's wrong, except for this line. But again, pretend that line's not there. You don't know for sure it's wrong. The only way you would know for sure it's wrong is probably by, like, at least skimming through the entire passage again, like, and saying, oh, does anything here talk about protectionism or whatever? But here's the thing, right? How could it be the biggest problem if they mention this being the reason it can't go on, like the reason they can't recover or they won't recover until they do this? How could that be a bigger problem than this and not be in the same paragraph?
Yeah.
The first paragraph is so important. Like, that's the point I'm drilling home now. It's first paragraph is really important. Most of the time. Maybe sometimes the conclusion will be in the second paragraph or something, but it's most of the time, the vast majority of the time, first paragraph tells you what to care about.
Yeah, that is true.
So yeah, but I think you nailed that. Like, that was really good.
Yeah, I mean, unless and until you didn't bring up that, if you didn't bring up what should I actually look for, otherwise I would have been doing my own way of solving. I would have read all the options, then maybe move back to the passage. But I really liked, the way that I should think. I mean, the way you suggested what I should be looking for, because the author implies what exactly should I be looking for when I read the question, so that I need not juggle in between the options and paragraph. And it actually helped. I mean, the way you asked me to look for has actually helped me to uh, get the answer right out of the passage and actually match it, even though I was not confident with E, but I was confident with B, because B is exactly what the passage is saying and what you asked me to look for.
Right.
That
Well,
way I
what
nailed
the
it.
what
Otherwise,
the question asked you to look
I'm
for.
not sure.
The question asked you to look for that.
Yeah.
It's not what I asked you to look for. It's what the question asked you to look for.
Yeah. I mean, you guided me in that way. That is in
Yeah.
that way that is how it helped me.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad. I'm really glad to hear that.
Yeah.
I think that specific skill is probably a very valuable one, regardless of the rest. And what I mean by that is, like, regardless of whether or not you want to read the whole passage at the start or not, regardless of whether or not you want to make notes at the start, whether or not you want to only read certain lines, whatever, regardless of all of that, how to find the answer when you have a question in front of you, like, I think that's a useful skill. So that's why I wanted to take the extra time on that question to really drill it, to say the thing that will make you more accurate, like a thing, I should say, not the thing. Like, by the way, this is the one, like the two-step process to guaranteeing V51. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. But, like, a skill that will really help to be confident on the answer choice is being very particular about what you're looking for, because there's so much information in these passages, especially long ones.
Yes.
You read 2 sentences and were able to answer that question
Yeah.
because you knew that you had what you needed, because you had a very, very good idea of what you needed.
Exactly.
Yeah. And like I said though, sometimes you might get that first assessment wrong, which is why if you can't rule it out for sure, you keep them, because hypothetically, let's say that whole line, like this line is the opposite. Maybe this line, and like I'm kind of messing with the structure a bit now, but let's pretend this line wasn't there, but
Okay.
there's a line in the last paragraph. The first line of the last paragraph says, protectionism is clearly the biggest roadblock, blah, 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 or something, right? Like, let's just pretend it says something like that.
Yeah.
At that point, that kind of language, that makes it very clear. Well, now they're saying this protectionism will make it impossible for this country to ever recover until something happens about that protectionism, whatever. Now it's like, well, maybe this leaders need to recognize it. Now maybe that's just talking about the fact that if they don't recognize it, they're never going to fix the problems with these other countries so that they stop being protectionist. Like, now maybe this is just supporting the idea that as long as protectionist policies remain in these other countries, nothing will ever get better. Like, if they have stuff like that and it's clearly down here like that, now maybe this is not the thing anymore, right?
Yes.
And if that was the case, and somehow we missed it, hopefully we didn't miss it when we're scanning through for keywords and things like that. But if we miss that somehow, we read this and we have the exact idea that you had of the problem here is the leaders. If they don't recognize this, it's a problem. And we go through these answer choices, and now we get to E again, and we're like, oh, I don't know if I can rule this out actually. All right. And, I'm pretty sure the language of this would have been slightly different as well. It wouldn't be quite as strong as it is. If this thing was down here, then that wouldn't be quite as strong. So maybe this is not as strong either in your mind. Like B is like a very good answer, but maybe you have more doubts about E. Well, when you see E and you see, oh, definitely can't happen without those countries changing their mind. Well, now, E looks a lot better. And my point is, I'm rambling again. My point is, that's why you might not necessarily get it right first time. What exactly was I looking for? I was looking for this line. Well, actually, do I have a reason? This is why you still look at every choice. That's why when you found B, you don't stop. You could have easily said, oh, I'm looking for this. Found it. B's the answer. You could have done that.
Yeah.
But what if you saw E and you go, wait a minute, that looks really good actually. E looks really good actually. Hang on. I'm just going to double check E. And then you find it down here and like, oh, wow. How did I almost pick B? It's so obviously E now. That's why you still check every answer. And you don't rule out something unless you know that it's definitely wrong. So yeah, I'm putting a bunch of different concepts together there, but yeah. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. I think that was a good session. It's a long one, but I think it was a good session. I hope that helped.
It was a long one, but it really helped me. I mean, the way I was doing RCs, or the way at least I have learned from your previous video, and now doing actually with you. It brought a new perspective to actually look what for in an RC and how to actually proceed working on RCs. Maybe, after through practice, I might be able to get the perfection of what exactly to extract from an RC.
Yeah.
But at least I found the direction to how to proceed doing RCs. Thanks a lot, Harry.
Do you think it helped?
It will definitely help.
Well, I was going to ask something specific. So when we did the time where I was stopping you in the moment and saying, right now, like what I would think about is this or whatever. Like in that last example, last question, for example, you started reading the answer choices. I stopped you. I said, hang on, try this. like that kind of thing. Like, do you think that
Yes.
helped you to recognize it? Like, it might make it easier for you to think about those things on your own?
Really it helped me, because otherwise I wouldn't have actually, it was like pinpoint. I mean, like, no, this is not what would you do, what should you do for this question, where should you be looking, not
Mm,
the entire thing.
mm,
So
right.
that question actually, has brought a new perspective, like, yeah, what should I be looking for?
Like, the vast majority of questions, like I've said this before, the vast majority of RC questions, they're very good at telling you where to look. They
Yeah.
mostly are very good at telling you where to look. And if we just scan through these 8 questions, I think we'll find that pattern true for all of it. Like question one, which of the
Question one,
following,
yes.
the difference between free trade and fair trade? Well,
Where to?
we probably know from our summary that there's actual definitions like right here. Um,
Exactly.
so we know exactly where to look for that.
Hmm.
It can be inferred that the author of the passage would most likely agree with which of the following statements about multilateral trade negotiations. This is an example of maybe the hardest type of finding, because we're looking for multilateral trade negotiations and we're looking for the author's opinion of it. So we don't want facts about it. We want what they say about it.
Yeah.
So, in the end, we find it here. Multilateral negotiations are this. That could be their opinion, if this is a list of their opinions, but then we double check, their opinion about this is it's outdated. But at the end of the day, though, we were still looking for multilateral trade negotiations, and we found that pretty easily. Like I said, me personally, I found it down here first, then I was like, wait, this can't be the first time they mention it, and I had to go back. But yeah,
Yeah.
um, they're very specific. They're very good at telling you where to look. So
Yeah.
the practice comes in
Yes.
recognizing where are they pointing you. It's like reading the map. It's
Exactly.
practicing reading the map.
Yeah.
I like that analogy, actually. The question is like a map telling you where to look for the answer, and half the battle is reading the map. I really like that analogy. That's cool.
Yeah.
Author's opinion of free traders and fair traders. Well, see where they talked about them. What do they say about them? They paralyzed it, etc., etc., based it on these outdated premises. It's all going to be in the paragraph about free and fair trade. Where do we look for the mid 40s? Well, that one's obvious for everybody, I think. um,
Yeah.
but yeah, you get the idea. It's very good at telling you
Yeah.
where to look. The exception being these annoying questions about, like, which of these are true except, like, all of these are true except, sorry.
Yeah.
But even this one was literally all in one sentence.
Yes.
All of that was in one sentence.
Except one.
Well, except one, which is the one left that you have to pick as the answer. So,
Yes.
yeah. Um, well, hang on. The generalizations. Oh, generalizations. Um, oh, sorry. No, this is the wrong question. I was thinking of the wrong question. This is the one that was like the general one. Yeah. So yeah, this is like the annoying one, where it's like, are there any statistics? Yeah, paragraph 4. Definitions of terms. Yeah, we have that in paragraph 3. So this is the one.
Yeah.
This is the annoying one. But most questions are
Yeah.
very good at telling you where to look. That's the point.
Yes.
Anyway, all right. I think we can wrap it up there, unless you have anything else you want to ask before we wrap it up.
No, but I just want to thank you so much.
I'm happy. I'm happy that you liked it. That you think it's
And I want you to, I mean, I wish you all the best for your exam. And if you get time, do help candidates like me have to post your exam.
I plan to. I definitely plan to. Um, they might not be 4.5 hour sessions, but
Yeah, yeah.
I definitely would like to keep doing this kind of thing. Because even a couple of hours every week, I want to stay sharp on this stuff too. Like I genuinely feel like these skills are all valuable skills to have in life, let alone studying for the exam. And so
Exactly.
I would like the idea of keeping it sharp in that way and still helping. And the study group is kind of becoming pretty big now, so
Yeah.
keeping that going, and I don't know. I like helping people, if that's not obvious. So I would like to be able to do that as long as I can. But let me know as well, like when you keep practicing RC, how that's going, and You know what?
Sure.
And even if you change things, like if you start practicing stuff and you go, oh, Harry was mentioning this, but I think this works better for me. I'd be curious, like even if you say I don't like that, I'm going to do this differently. I'd be curious what those things are. Like so, at some point, if you want to come back and tell me, oh yeah, I've been doing this and that's been really great, and I actually changed this and I do this instead, that works for me. I'd be really curious to hear about that too.
Sure, sure, definitely.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you. I'm gonna.
Thank you so much.
No worries. Yeah, I'll wrap this session here. I'm staying online, so anyone who wants to keep studying something else, or like if you want to keep doing RC, feel free. I will be staying online and switching to co-working now, so I'm going to be studying my own thing, not sharing on screen like this. Feel free to stick around, and we can catch up during the breaks.
Thank you so much.
No worries, mate. I'll talk to you later on.
Yeah, bye.
Bye. All right. And as I was saying, yeah, anyone who wants to stick around, we're going back to co-working. Although I'm going to take a little bit of time at the end of this focus to switch the camera back around. Hello. Yeah, I'm going to take a little bit of time out of this focus to get myself some food. And then I'll get back to my own study. So with no more ado, I will turn the music back up, turn my voice off. Good luck for this session, anyone who is still studying. And let me know what you're working on. Chuck it in the list. All right. Bye.